Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step into a city that smells of wet brick, coal smoke, cheap cologne and rainwater gathering in the gutters. You are standing beneath a crooked street lamp in the 1920s listening to trolley bells, distant jazz, and the soft slap of shoes on pavement. Somewhere nearby a door opens for 3 seconds and you hear laughter glasses and a trumpet slipping out into the night. You are not a gangster, not yet. You are just tired, underpaid, and very interested in rent being paid on time. A man in a good coat says he has work. Easy work, quiet work. Naturally, that means you probably won't survive this, but let's not be dramatic too early. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you are listening from and what your local time is. Now dim the lights and let your footsteps carry you down a narrow side street where the city seems to breathe through cellar grates and back doors. You begin as most people begin, not with a grand criminal oath, not with some cinematic handshake in a candlelit room, but with a favour. A crate needs moving, a note needs carrying. A cousin knows a man who knows another man, and suddenly you are useful. The word itself feels harmless, useful, not wicked, not powerful. Just useful enough to be noticed. Your coat is thin, your hands are cold, and the winter air has a metallic taste. The city around you is crowded with people trying to climb one rung higher before the whole ladder shakes. In the early 1920s, prohibition has made the sale of alcohol illegal across the United States, but it has not made people stop drinking. That is the important historical fact waiting under every doorstep tonight. The 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act have not dried the country out. They have simply moved the bottle into the shadows where shadows charge better prices. You trudge past a bakery closing for the night. Yeast and sugar hang in the air warm and comforting. Across the alley a butcher washes blood from the stones with a bucket of grey water, while a boy no older than 16 whistles like he has nowhere to be. He gives you a nod. You nod back because everyone here understands that looking too curious is a bad hobby. Your first task is small. You carry a wrapped parcel from the back of a grocery to a boarding house 2 blocks away. It is heavy enough to matter, light enough to deny. The grocer tells you not to drop it. He smiles when he says this, and his smile has the warmth of a locked drawer. Inside the parcel are bottles wrapped in old newspaper. You know because one corner tears and the glass neck winks at you like a secret. You pretend not to notice. This becomes one of your earliest skills. Not noticing. It is surprisingly exhausting. The boarding house hallway smells of boiled cabbage, damp wool and furniture polish. A woman opens the door before you knock twice. She has flour on one sleeve and a face that has practiced calm for years. She takes the parcel, gives you a coin and says, "Come back Thursday." Just like that, you have a schedule. It is strange how quickly danger becomes routine. At first, your heart taps like a nervous drummer each time you pass a patrolman. Then after a few nights, you learn which patrolman likes money, which one likes silence, and which one likes being treated as if he knows nothing at all. A street that seemed terrifying on Monday becomes ordinary by Friday. This is how the underworld grows around you. Not all at once, but like ivy on brick, quiet and patient. You are not working for the mob in the way later movies will imagine it. There is no single giant beast with a nameplate on the door. There are neighbourhood gangs, political fixers, bootleggers, gamblers, drivers, guards, barkeeps, accountants, widows, renting rooms, musicians, paid in cash, and boys who run messages because they are fast, and because nobody searches a boy unless things are already very bad. Historians still argue whether the 1920s mob was truly a modern corporation in its early form, or more of a loose patchwork of families, border crews, favours and opportunists. As you stand in that hallway with your coin warming in your palm, it feels less like a corporation and more like a weather system. You do not join the rain, you simply get wet. Your boss, if that is the word, is a man called Mr. Rocco, though you're fairly sure that is not the name his mother used when she was angry. He operates out of a pool room where the felt tables are worn smooth and the ceiling fans turn lazily through smoke. The room clicks and murmurs all day. Balls striking balls, men clearing throats, coins touching wood. The smell is tobacco chalk dust beer that is not supposed to exist, and the faint sourness of nervous sweat. Mr. Rocco does not look like a monster. That is inconvenient, really. Monsters should have the decency to appear monstrous. He has tidy hair, soft hands, and a habit of speaking gently as if every sentence is being laid down to sleep. When he asks your name, he repeats it once correctly. This impresses you more than it should. People in hard times are often hungry to be remembered. He tells you there will be more work if you keep your head down. Deliveries, messages, watching a door, maybe helping load a truck, nothing fancy. Fancy, he says, is for fools and funeral flowers. You laugh because he smiles. You also laugh because you are not completely stupid. The city outside is changing every night. New money moves through old streets. Respectable men who would never steal a loaf of bread now buy illegal whiskey with the solemn dignity of church elders purchasing hymnals. Women with bobbed hair step from taxis and vanish through doors with peepholes. Jazz spills up stairwells. Passwords change. Police whistles blow in the distance and everyone pretends not to hear. A quirky little tidbit drifts through the pool room one evening, passed along by a piano player with sleepy eyes. Some speakeasies, he claims, serve drinks in teacups so customers can look innocent if the police arrive. Tea apparently has never worked so hard in its life. You imagine a room full of people blinking over cups of gin and calling it breakfast blend. The thought almost makes you smile. But mostly you learn. You learn the geography of fear. Which alley has a loose cobblestone? Which back door sticks in the rain? Which church basement hosts card games on Tuesdays? Which tailor will sew a hidden pocket into a coat without asking why? Which restaurant keeps two menus, one for food and one for courage? You also learn the social rules. Do not ask what is in the bag. Do not repeat what you hear. Do not admire anyone's ring too long. Do not say a name if a nickname will do. Never count another man's money with your eyes. If someone calls you lucky, consider leaving early. And yet beneath all this, life continues with ordinary softness. Children play stickball in the street by afternoon. Laundry snaps between windows. Mothers shout from stoops. A barber sweeps hair into a little grey hill. The same neighbourhood that hides illegal liquor also passes soup to the sick, lends funeral coats, and watches over children whose fathers work nights. Nothing is simple here. That is the part a bedtime history always has to whisper gently. People are rarely only one thing. You feel that contradiction in yourself. The coin from your first delivery buys bread, coffee, and a little meat wrapped in paper. It also buys silence. You tell yourself you're not hurting anyone. You're carrying bottles, not breaking bones. You're making rent, not making history. But history, rude as ever, does not ask permission before using ordinary people. By the end of your first week, you know how to enter the pool room without looking around. You know Mr. Rocco likes his coffee pale and sweet. You know the driver named Sal keeps a rosary on the mirror and a wrench under the seat. You know a girl called Tess can spot a plainclothes officer before he finishes crossing the street. You know the city has 2 maps, one printed and one whispered. Tonight you stand at the mouth of an alley with another parcel under your arm. Rain ticks softly on trash can lids. Somewhere above you a radio plays a thin, crackling tune. The parcel is heavier than last time. The street is darker too. But your steps are steadier now, and that may be the most dangerous thing of all. Because the first door has opened. And once you learn how many doors exist behind the ordinary city, it becomes very difficult not to wonder what waits behind the next one. By the time Thursday comes again, you no longer feel like a visitor in the hidden city. You still walk carefully, of course. Careful is the only sensible way to walk when every second doorway seems to have a different meaning after sunset. But the fear has softened at the edges. It has become a scarf around your neck, scratchy but familiar. You arrive at the grocery just after dusk. The front window shows apples, onions, sacks of flour, and a respectable pyramid of canned tomatoes. Everything looks honest enough to bore a Sunday school teacher. But around back, where the alley smells of damp wood, horse droppings, gasoline and old cabbage leaves, two men are lifting crates into a truck with its license plate half hidden by mud. The crates are stamped with harmless words. Pickles, soap, mineral water. The city is apparently drowning in mineral water these days. Very thirsty times. Mr. Rocco is there, leaning against the brick wall with his hat low and his gloves folded in one hand. He does not raise his voice. He never seems to need to. Men move faster around quiet people you notice. "You ride along tonight," he says. "That is all. No ceremony, no explanation. Your place in the machine shifts by one small click." The Prohibition machine is not really a machine, not in the polished factory sense. It is more like 1,000 small contraptions, tied together with string greed, fear, and astonishing amounts of paperwork nobody wants the government to see. It begins far from the club glass and the saxophone glow. It begins in barns, warehouses, cellars, back rooms, fishing boats, rail yards, and pharmacies with this unusually ambitious cough remedies. It begins with men who know how to distill grain alcohol, women who know which neighbours will keep quiet, drivers who can stay awake through rain, and officials who discover with deep moral sadness that envelopes are easy to carry. A mainstream fact sits at the centre of it all. Prohibition created an enormous illegal market for alcohol, and organised crime groups grew richer by supplying what millions of Americans still wanted. Beer, whiskey, gin, rum and wine did not vanish. They became cargo. They became routes. They became passwords, debts, payrolls and grudges. You climb into the passenger side of the truck beside Sal, the driver with the rosary on the mirror. The cab smells of oil leather onions from someone's lunch, and the sharp chemical bite of alcohol leaking through imperfect corks. Sal turns the key, pats the steering wheel twice, and murmurs something that might be a prayer or might be an insult. With Sal, the difference is not always clear. The truck rolls into the street heavy and slow. The city passes in strips of lamplight. Tenements rise above you, their windows yellow and tired. A woman shakes crumbs from a cloth. A child coughs behind a curtain. Somewhere in the distance, a train moans like an animal being asked to work late. You are told to look ordinary. This is not as easy as it sounds. Your body wants to become a question mark. Your shoulders tighten. Your hands sit uselessly in your Sam. Sal glances at you and says, "You look like you swallowed a harmonica." You relax slightly because being insulted can be comforting when done with routine affection. The first stop is a garage. Not a glamorous place, just a brick building with 2 wide doors and a sign advertising repairs. Inside, the floor is black with grease. Tools hang from hooks. A radio whispers from a shelf. The mechanic barely looks up as the truck backs in. He wipes his hands on a rag, taps twice on one crate and nods. Half the load stays here. Later it will be divided again. Some bottles will go to a speakeasy near the theatre district. Some will go to private apartments where the wealthy host dinners and pretend the law is a matter for less imaginative people. Some will be watered down, rebottled, relabeled and sold at prices that would make a saint reconsider sainthood. The whole business depends on division. No one person knows everything. One driver knows a route. One clerk knows a code. One bartender knows which customer pays late. One police captain knows which nights to walk on the other side of the block. It is a system built from partial knowledge because partial knowledge is harder to prosecute and easier to deny. Historians still debate how centralized these operations really were in the early 1920s, whether powerful bosses controlled vast networks from the top, or whether many local crews improvised quickly and only later became more organized. From your seat in the truck, it feels like both at once. There are orders, yes, but also accidents, favors, cousins. Lucky turns and men making decisions because the rain has changed traffic on 4th Street. The second stop takes you closer to the river, where the air turns colder and carries the smell of tarfish, wet rope and coal smoke. Men unload barrels from a boat in silence except for the soft grunt of effort and the creak of wood. One barrel is marked as machine parts. Another claims to contain molasses. You begin to understand that labels are less about truth and more about confidence. A quirky tidbit comes from Sal as he chews a toothpick and watches the dock. You know, he says some folks make bathtub gin in actual bathtubs. You have heard the phrase, but he insists it is sometimes literal. Not always, not like every flapper in town is rinsing juniper from the porcelain, but enough for the joke to travel. People mix grain alcohol with flavourings, glycerin oils, and whatever else promises to make it taste less like regret in a glass. The thought of a bathtub serving as both plumbing and distillery feels deeply unreasonable, but the 1920s seemed committed to being unreasonable on principle. You touch one barrel with your gloved hand, the wood is damp and cold, beneath your palm the cargo inside shifts faintly. It is strange to think that this hidden liquid can pay rent, buy police protection fund, a club ruin, a liver, start a fight, or make a room sing until 3 a.m. A bottle is never just a bottle here. It is a little glass engine. As the night deepens, you begin to see the machine's rhythm. A truck moves from alley to dock to garage. A boy on a bicycle carries a message ahead. A woman at a boarding house window lowers a shade to show the coast is clear. A man in a hat stands under a theatre awning for exactly 9 minutes, then leaves. Perhaps he is waiting for his sweetheart. Perhaps he is counting patrolmen. In this city, romance and surveillance wear similar shoes. You are given a small notebook, but it contains no real names. Initials, numbers, marks, little crosses in the margins. You are told to memorize what matters and forget the rest. The notebook smells of pencil lead and damp wool. It makes you feel more official, which is foolish because official things usually have worse consequences. Near midnight, Sal pulls into an alley behind a restaurant. From the front comes the soft glow of respectable dining. From the back comes the clink of crates and the low murmur of men counting quietly. Someone hands you a sandwich wrapped in paper. It is thick with mustard and cold beef, and it tastes better than anything has a right to taste in an alley. You eat standing up, listening to the pipes rattle in the wall. Above you laughter blooms from a private room. The people upstairs will drink from clean glasses and complain about politics. Down here you wipe mustard from your thumb and learn how pleasure arrives at the table. That is the part nobody likes to picture. Every bright illegal night requires dull illegal labour. Someone lifts the crate, someone drives the road, someone watches the corner, someone pays the man who looks away. Working for the mob is not only danger and swagger, mostly it is logistics with a pulse rate problem. By the time the truck returns to the grocery, the sky has begun to pale behind the rooftops. Your back aches. Your fingers smell of wood metal and onions. Mr. Rocco appears from the doorway as if he's been waiting inside the brick itself. Sal gives him the notebook. You give him nothing because you are not trusted with anything worth giving. Still, Mr. Rocco looks at you for a moment and nods. It is not praise. Praise would be too generous. It is recognition, and that is warmer than it should be. You walk home through the early morning streets, past milk wagons, and men sweeping storefronts, past policemen who look tired enough to be human again. The city is waking up innocent, or pretending to. Bread is being delivered, newspapers are being stacked, curtains are opening, and beneath all of it, behind the groceries and garages and polite little restaurant doors, the machine you rode through the night keeps turning slow and patient, waiting for the next thirsty evening. By the next week, your nights have begun to tilt toward music. Not your music exactly. You're not paid to play sing-dance or enjoy yourself in any official capacity. Enjoyment, you are learning, is for customers and for people who can afford to be foolish. You're paid to carry watch, remember, and disappear into corners. Still, the music finds you. It leaks through floorboards, slips under doors, trembles through glass, and settles in your bones long after you leave. The speakeasy is hidden beneath a flower shop. At street level, the shop is all innocence. Lilies, roses, ferns in clay pots, damp green stems standing in metal buckets. The air smells sweet and earthy with that faint cemetery perfume flowers sometimes have when too many of them gather in one room. A bell above the door gives a delicate little ring whenever someone enters, as if announcing only harmless errands. A bouquet for mother, a rose for a sweetheart, A fern for the parlour. Very respectable. Extremely botanical. Nothing to see here. But behind a curtain down a narrow stair, the city changes its clothes. You descend into warmth, tobacco smoke, perfume, spilled gin and brass. The ceiling is low, the lights are shaded amber. Tables crowd together like gossiping neighbours. A small band plays near the far wall piano and cornet, and drums sending a lazy, bright rhythm through the room. The music does not simply fill the place. It makes the air seem thicker, easier to breathe, and harder to think in. This is where you work tonight. Your job is simple according to Mr. Rocco, which means it's not simple at all. You stand near the service passage and help move bottles from storage to bar. You watch for trouble. You learn faces. You do not stare at the customers, but you see them anyway. That is a useful difference. They arrive in waves. Office clerks with loosened collars. Salesmen with tired jokes. Women in beaded dresses that flash like fish scales under the light. Married men who suddenly remember they are adventurous after 10 o'clock. Couples who sit too close, friends who laugh too loudly. Quiet drinkers who nurse one glass and look as if they are waiting for bad news to catch up. A mainstream historical fact hums behind the room speakeasies became famous symbols of Prohibition-era nightlife, especially in large cities where illegal bars could range from shabby cellars to elegant clubs with music dancing and well-dressed patrons. This one sits somewhere in the middle. Not grand enough for silk curtains, not shabby enough for sawdust on the floor. It is a place that wants to be classy but keeps a mop close by. The bartender is Tess, the girl who can spot a plainclothes officer before he finishes crossing the street. She has bobbed hair, sharp eyes, and a way of polishing glasses that makes every man at the bar feel personally judged. She calls you new shoes even though your shoes are old because she says you still walk like the floor might ask you questions. Keep your back to the wall when you can, she tells you. And if someone orders coffee after midnight, they don't want coffee. You ask what they want. She gives you a look so patient it feels educational. They want to be seen asking for coffee. Naturally. The secret language of people pretending not to have secrets. The first hours pass in motion. You carry bottles wrapped in towels. You stack empty crates. You wipe a spill before it reaches the piano. You learn that gin smells sharper than whiskey, that champagne makes people generous and careless, and that beer barrels are heavier than moral arguments. Somewhere near table 6, a woman laughs with her whole head tipped back, her pearl necklace glowing against her throat. At table 9, a man loses money at cards without moving his face. Near the door, 2 doormen check passwords and coats with equal suspicion. The password tonight is orchid, appropriate given the flower shop, also mildly ridiculous. You hear a banker whisper it like he's opening a tomb. You hear a young woman say it with such bored confidence that the doorman nearly apologizes for asking. Later, a drunk man forgets it and says onion, which is close only in the sense that both are plants. He is not admitted. A quirky tidbit drifts through the room during a lull. Tess tells you some clubs kept legal-looking setups ready in case of raids, including teacups for liquor, false walls, hidden drains, and bottles that could vanish faster than a guilty thought. You remember Sal's story about bathtub gin, and now the whole city feels like one huge magic trick performed by people who really should get more sleep. Near midnight, the band shifts into something slower. The drums brush softly. The cornet sighs. Couples sway close enough to share one shadow. You stand by the passage with a crate in your hands, and for a moment the room seems almost tender. The glow softens faces. The smoke turns the light into ribbons. Even Mr. Rocco, sitting at a back table with 2 men in dark suits, looks less like danger and more like an uncle waiting for dessert. But tenderness here is rented by the hour. You notice the system behind the gamma. Every bottle poured has travelled through fear. Every song is timed around risk. Every employee knows the exits. The piano player keeps his tips in 2 pockets, one for himself and one for the house. The doorman listens for more than passwords. Tess watches hands, not smiles. When someone knocks incorrectly at the service door, 3 conversations die at once. Historians continue to dispute how much speakeasies genuinely transform social life, especially for women, and how much later nostalgia exaggerates their freedom and glamour. From where you stand, the answer feels slippery. Women are here, certainly. They drink openly, smoke, openly dance with a confidence that would scandalise older relatives into fainting decoratively. Yet they are watched, judged, desired, and sometimes used by the business in ways that feel familiar and unfair. Freedom and danger sit at the same table sharing a cigarette. A woman named Clara works the coat room. She knows everyone's name, though she pretends not to. Her booth smells of wool perfume, wet umbrellas, and little envelopes hidden in lining seams. She tells you the coat room is the best place to hear secrets because people think coats are not witnesses. She has heard affairs begin debts, confessed lies rehearsed, and one man practicing a proposal to the wrong woman by mistake. That one, she says, was almost worth the cover charge. You like Clara. Everyone likes Clara, which may be her most dangerous talent. Around 1 a.m, Trouble arrives wearing a grey hat. He is not large. That disappoints you somehow. Trouble should be easier to identify from a distance. He comes in with 2 friends, orders whiskey, and starts speaking too loudly to Tess. She answers with calm boredom. He leans farther across the bar. You feel the room notice without turning. The doorman shifts his weight. The piano keeps playing. Mr. Rocco does not move, but one of the men beside him places his cigarette in the ashtray very carefully. You are told with a glance to take fresh bottles to the rear storage room. This is not because fresh bottles are needed. It is because new shoes should not stand near grey hats when grey hats are making choices. In the storage room, the air is cooler. Shelves line the walls. Bottles sit in rows like quiet soldiers. You hear muffled voices through the door, then a chair scrape, then silence. No crash, no scream, just a brief thinning of the music as if the band has inhaled. When you come back out, the man in the grey hat is gone. His friends are gone too. Tess is polishing the bar. Mr. Rocco is sipping coffee that is not coffee. The piano player smiles at his keys and begins another tune. Nobody explains, nobody needs to. That is the speakeasy night shift. Not one thing, but many layered together. Velvet over brick, jazz over fear, laughter over calculation. A woman's perfume mixing with spilled whiskey and floor soap. You're close enough to the glamour to feel its warmth, but never close enough to forget who tends the furnace underneath. Near closing, the customers leave in little clusters, blinking as they climb back into the ordinary street. Some look happier, some look ruined, some look exactly the same, which may be the saddest option. You help Tess gather glasses, their rims marked with lipstick fingerprints and the last traces of illegal courage. When you finally climb the stairs into the flower shop, dawn is blue against the windows. The lilies stand patiently in their heavy buckets, pretending they have slept through everything. You step outside with sore arms and music still moving softly in your chest, while behind you, below the flowers, the hidden room exhales and prepares to become invisible again. The rhythm of the city shifts again, and this time it feels quieter. After the music, after the clinking glasses and the low hum of jazz, you find yourself walking through neighbourhoods where the night settles more heavily. The streets are narrower here, the buildings closer together, and the sounds travel differently. A cough from an upstairs window feels intimate. A door closing echoes longer than it should. Even your footsteps seem to listen to themselves. Tonight you are not carrying bottles. Tonight you are carrying numbers. At first it sounds harmless, almost mathematical, almost clean. Numbers have a way of pretending they belong to order, to logic, to something tidy and respectable. But here in these streets, numbers are something else entirely. They are hope folded into paper. They are small risks taken by people who cannot afford large ones. You are working the numbers game. It moves quietly through the neighbourhood, woven into daily life so smoothly that it almost disappears. A butcher places a bet between cutting meat. A seamstress whispers a number while handing over a hemmed dress. A man buying bread adds 2 digits to his order just loud enough for the right ears. The system relies on memory trust and an unspoken understanding that everyone is participating in something unofficial but deeply real. A widely accepted historical detail is that numbers, Games, often called policy games, were extremely popular in urban areas during the early 20th century, especially among working-class communities. They offered a small chance at a big payout, and for many that chance was enough to keep the system alive. Your role is simple on paper. You collect slips, you deliver them, you keep your face neutral and your pockets organised. But like everything else in this world, the simplicity hides layers. You start your route at a corner store where the owner greets you with a nod that could mean anything. He hands you a folded piece of paper along with a pack of matches. The paper is tucked so neatly inside that anyone watching would assume it is part of the purchase. You slide it into your coat without looking. That is the rule, never look. Looking turns you into a witness, and witnesses, as you are beginning to understand, are rarely comfortable people. The next stop is a laundress who works out of her apartment. Steam curls out of her windows even at night, carrying the scent of soap and damp cloth into the hallway. She presses a coin into your hand and murmurs a number under her breath so softly you almost miss it. You repeat it once quietly and she nods. No paper this time, just memory. You move through the neighbourhood like a thread being pulled through fabric. Each stop is small, each exchange is brief, but together they form something larger, something structured and deliberate. A peculiar little detail floats through your mind from something Sal mentioned earlier in the week. Some players choose their numbers based on dreams, not random guesses but symbols. A dog becomes 7, rain becomes 12, a lost tooth might mean 31. Entire dream dictionaries circulate quietly, translating sleep into strategy. It sounds absurd, and yet here you are carrying fragments of other people's dreams in your coat pocket. You wonder, briefly, what number you would choose. Probably something cautious, something forgettable. That seems to be your specialty. As the night deepens, you begin to notice patterns. Certain buildings produce more slips. Certain faces appear more often. A man with a limp always bets on the same number. A young woman changes hers every week as if chasing something just out of reach. An old man at the end of your route hands you the same combination. Every time his hands steady, his eyes distant. You do not ask why. The system does not encourage curiosity. There is also the matter of trust. The people you collect from trust that their numbers will be recorded accurately, that their bets will be honoured, that the system will not cheat them more than expected. Because there is always some level of expected loss. That is how the system survives. You in turn are trusted to deliver everything intact, no missing slips, no altered numbers, no forgotten stops. It is a delicate chain and you are one of its smaller links. Small but necessary. Some researchers have questioned how fair these games actually were, suggesting that the operators had ways to influence outcomes or skim profits in ways players could not detect. Others argue that in some communities the games were surprisingly consistent and even provided a form of informal economic support. From where you stand, it feels less like fairness and more like faith. People believe in the possibility of winning. That belief is enough. Midway through your route, you pass a group of children playing on the sidewalk. One of them is chalking numbers onto the pavement, laughing as another tries to guess the pattern. For a moment, the game looks innocent again. Just numbers, just play. But then one of the boys glances at you, and his expression changes. Not fear exactly, recognition. He knows what you are doing, or at least he knows enough to understand that it is not just a walk. You keep moving. By the time you reach the final stop, your pockets are heavier, not just with paper, but with the weight of responsibility. You return to the pool room where the air feels thicker than usual, as if the walls themselves are listening. Mr. Rocco is there, of course. He always seems to be there. You hand over the slips without comment. He does not count them immediately. Instead, he places them on the table, smooths them into a neat stack, and looks at you for a moment. You remember everything he asks. You nod. He nods back as if this is the only answer that exists. The counting happens later behind a closed door you are not invited to enter. You sit in the main room, listening to the familiar sounds of billiard balls and low conversation, and try not to think about what happens if a number is wrong, if a slip is missing, if a memory fails. Because here mistakes are not just mistakes, they are signals, and signals attract attention. When you finally leave, the city is quieter than you have ever known it. The early morning has not yet begun, The night has not fully ended. It is a strange in-between time where everything feels suspended. You walk home with empty pockets and a full mind replaying the route in your head, checking each step, each face, each number. It is not enough to do the job, you must also remember doing it. That is the part no one mentions at the beginning. Working for the mob is not just about what you carry, it's about what you keep inside your head. And as you reach your door with the first hint of dawn touching the rooftops, you realize that the numbers are still there quietly arranging themselves behind your eyes, waiting to be delivered again. The nights grow longer, or perhaps you simply notice them more. Sleep becomes something you negotiate with rather than something you receive. Your body learns to rest in fragments in the quiet hours between assignments in the brief stillness before the next knock on the door. Even when you do lie down, your mind keeps moving, replaying routes, faces, numbers, and now roads. Because tonight you are leaving the city. Sal is waiting by the truck, again engine idling low, a faint vibration humming through the metal like a nervous thought. The air smells different here at the edge of town, less smoke, more damp earth. There is a softness to it, but not comfort, just space. You ever been outside the city this late, he asks, not looking at you. You shake your head. He nods once as if confirming something he already knew. Keep your eyes open, he says. Out there it's quieter, makes things louder. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you climb in anyway. The truck is heavier tonight. Not just physically, though the crates stacked in the back are packed tight with bottles cushioned in straw. It feels heavier in purpose, in risk. The city, for all its dangers, at least offers cover. Noise, crowds, movement. Out here there is less to hide behind. As you roll onto the darker roads, the streetlights thin out. Buildings give way to open stretches of land, broken fences, clusters of trees that look like silhouettes cut from black paper. The road itself is uneven, patched in places full of shallow dips that jolt the truck just enough to keep you alert. A well-established fact at the time is that much of the illegal alcohol did not originate in the cities where it was sold. It travelled from rural distilleries, hidden stills and bugling routes that crossed state lines or even international borders. Canada in particular became a significant source of liquor during Prohibition, with shipments moving south through a network of creative and often risky channels. Tonight's route is not quite that grand, but it connects to something larger. You are picking up a fresh supply from a farm several miles out where the work is done quietly, and the neighbours have learned not to ask questions. The road narrows as you turn off the main path, gravel crunches under the tyres. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, catching glimpses of fence posts, tall grass, and the occasional startled animal darting away. The engine sounds louder out here, as if it knows there is nothing to compete with. You feel it too. Every sound seems sharper. The creak of the truck bed, the rustle of straw, even your own breathing feels slightly too loud. Sal drives with steady hands, one resting lightly on the wheel, the other tapping a slow rhythm against his leg. The rosary swings gently from the mirror, catching the light in small quiet flashes. You see that he says, suddenly nodding towards a distant glow. At first you think it's just another farmhouse, but as you get closer the shape becomes clearer. A barn large and weathered with light leaking through the cracks in its wooden sides. Smoke curls from a low chimney nearby. That's us, Sal says. The truck slows as you approach. A man steps out from the shadow of the barn raising a lantern. He does not wave. He does not call out. He simply stands there waiting. You climb out of the truck, the cool night air wrapping around you like a damp coat. The ground is soft under your feet, the smell of earth and grain mixing with something sharper, more chemical. Inside the barn, the operation reveals itself. Barrels line the walls. Copper stills gleam faintly in the lantern light. Tubing runs between them in looping improvised paths. The air is thick with the scent of fermenting mash, sweet and sour, at the same time with an undercurrent that stings your nose. Men move quietly between the equipment, checking valves, adjusting heat, watching the slow drip of liquid into waiting containers. It is work that requires patience, precision, and a willingness to remain unseen. A lesser-known detail about these rural operations is that many of them relied on traditional distilling techniques passed down through generations, especially in regions where making alcohol had long been part of local culture. Prohibition did not invent the knowledge. It simply gave it a new purpose and a higher price. The man with the lantern gestures towards the truck. No words, just a movement of the hand. You and Sal begin loading the fresh barrels. They are heavier than the crates you are used to, solid and awkward, requiring careful handling. Your arms strain with the effort, your breath coming faster as you adjust to the weight. As you work, you notice how quiet everyone is. Not tense exactly, but focused. Conversations are minimal. Instructions are given in short phrases, sometimes just a look or a nod. At one point you catch a fragment of a discussion between two of the men. Something about a new route. Something about increased patrols near the river. The words are low, almost swallowed by the hum of the stills. There is a sense that everything here is temporary. The equipment can be moved, the barrels can be hidden, the people can disappear if needed. Some historians have suggested that these rural distilling sites were constantly shifting, relocating to avoid detection, while others believe many operated in the same locations for extended periods, protected by isolation and local cooperation. Standing here watching the careful balance of secrecy and routine, it feels like both could be true depending on the place and the people. When the truck is finally loaded, you take a moment to stretch your back, looking out through the open barn door. The night beyond is vast and still, no street lights, no distant music. Just darkness and the faint outline of fields stretching away into nothing. It's peaceful in a way that feels almost suspicious. Sal lights a cigarette, the small flame briefly illuminating his face. He takes a drag, exhales slowly, and then looks at you. "City makes you think you're hidden," he says. "Out here you know you're not." You nod, understanding a little more now. The return trip feels different. Heavier, yes, but also more exposed. Every set of headlights in the distance makes your shoulders tense. Every bend in the road feels like a question waiting to be answered. At one point you pass a parked car with its lights off, just sitting there by the side of the road. No movement, no sound. Sal does not slow down. He does not speed up either. He simply keeps the same steady pace, eyes forward, hands calm. You do the same. The car remains behind you, silent and still. A strange, almost trivial detail crosses your mind as you drive. Some bootleggers reportedly modified their vehicles with hidden compartments, reinforced suspensions, and even false bottoms to conceal their cargo. You glance at the truck you are in. It looks ordinary. Perhaps that is the point. Ordinary things attract less attention. When the city finally reappears on the horizon, its lights flickering like a distant promise, you feel a subtle shift inside yourself. Relief, certainly, but also something else. Growing awareness of how far this world extends beyond the streets you first walked. The machine is larger than you imagined. It stretches into fields, across borders, through quiet towns and busy ports. It connects people who will never meet, each playing their part in a system that depends on movement secrecy and trust. As you pull back into the familiar alley behind the grocery, the smells return. Smoke-refused damp brick. The city wraps around you again, loud and crowded and strangely comforting. You climb out of the truck, your muscles aching, your clothes carrying the scent of grain and alcohol. Mr. Rocco is waiting as always. He does not ask about the trip, he does not need to. Instead, he gives you a brief look, the kind that measures without seeming to, and then nods once. Another small click in the machine. You realise as you head home through the early morning streets that the roads you travel tonight are now part of you. The quiet, the distance, the sense of being seen even when no one is visible. And as you pass beneath the familiar street lamp near your building, you understand something new. The city is not the whole story, it is just where the story is easiest to hear. The next time you're called to the pool room, it is earlier than usual. The light outside is still fading. The sky caught between pale blue and the first hints of evening grey. Inside, the air feels thicker than before, as if the room has been holding its breath. The usual sounds are there, billiard balls clicking, low voices. A radio murmuring somewhere in the back, but they seem quieter, more contained. You sense it before anyone says anything. Tonight you are going upstairs. The office is not what you expected. You imagined something grander, perhaps. Dark wood, heavy curtains, a desk that looked like it could command armies. Instead, the room is modest. A desk, yes, but not imposing. 2 chairs, a small cabinet, a window that looks out over the street, its glass slightly warped, bending the world into soft distortion. Mr. Rocco is already there, seated, his hat placed neatly on the desk. Another man stands by the window, his back turned, hands clasped behind him. You hesitate for just a moment at the doorway. "Come in," Mr. Rocco says, his voice calm as always. You step inside, closing the door gently behind you. The click of the latch feels louder than it should. The man by the window turns. He is older than Mr. Rocco, with hair that has begun to grey at the temples. His suit is well cut, his posture relaxed but precise. His eyes settle on you with a kind of quiet attention that makes you feel as though you have been measured and filed away somewhere already. "This is the one," the man asks. Mr. Rocco nods once. You are not introduced. Names you are learning are often unnecessary at this level, or perhaps they are too valuable to be given freely. The man gestures toward the chair across from the desk. You sit, your hands resting on your knees, trying to appear steady. It is a strange moment. You have carried bottles, numbers, crates. You have moved through alleys and barns and hidden rooms. But this feels different. This feels like stepping closer to the center of something you have only glimpsed from the edges. The man studies you for a moment, then speaks. "You've been working," he says. "Not a question." "Yes," you reply. "Doing what you're told." "Yes." He nods slightly as if confirming a detail in a ledger. "Good." "Oh, good," he says. That's rarer than it should be. There is a pause, not uncomfortable exactly, but deliberate. A space in which you are expected to exist without filling it. You wait. A broadly accepted point about organized crime during this era is that leadership often relied less on overt displays of power and more on reputation memory and quiet authority. The men at the top did not need to shout. Their influence travelled ahead of them, carried by stories, by results, by the simple fact that things happened when they decided they should. You are beginning to understand that now. The man moves to the desk, resting one hand lightly on its surface. "You know what we do?" he asks. You consider your answer carefully. "We move things you say, we keep things moving." A faint smile touches his lips. "That's part of it," he says. "We also keep things from moving. We decide which doors open and which stay closed." He picks up a small object from the desk. Oh. A coin. He turns it between his fingers, of the metal catching the light. "People think this is about liquor," he continues, "or numbers, or cards. Those are just tools. What matters is control." He sets the coin down. Control of streets, of information, of who owes what to whom. You nod, though you are not sure how much of this you are meant to understand. Mr. Rocco watches quietly, his expression unchanged. The man leans back, slightly studying you again. "You ever wonder why you're here?" he asks. The question catches you off guard. You could say it is for money, for work, for survival. All of those are true, their way. "I needed a job, you say, finally!" He nods as if that answer is both expected and insufficient. Everyone needs something, he says. That's how this works. There is a subtle shift in the room. Not visible, not tangible, but felt. As if the conversation has moved from observation to decision. A lesser-known aspect of these organizations is how carefully they selected and evaluated the people who worked for them, even at lower levels. Reliability, discretion, and the ability to follow instructions were often valued more than strength or bravado. You begin to see that this moment is part of that process. "You've done well so far," the man says. "Kept your head down, didn't ask questions you shouldn't." Another pause. "That's good," he adds. "But it also means we need to know something." You feel your shoulders tighten slightly. "If something goes wrong," he says, "what do you do?" The question hangs in the air. You think of the truck on the dark road, the speakeasy when the music faltered, the numbers in your pocket. "I fix it," you say. "How?" You hesitate. "I do what I'm told," you answer. The man's gaze sharpens just slightly. And if no one is there to tell you, he asks. The room feels smaller. You consider your options. There is no safe answer, only better ones. "I keep it from getting worse," you say slowly. "Until someone can." He studies you for a long moment. Then finally he nods. "That'll do," he says. The tension in your chest eases just a fraction. Historians continue to examine how much autonomy individuals at different levels of these organizations actually had and how much decision-making was centralized. From your perspective, it seems clear that while orders flow downward, there is also an expectation that you can think, adapt, and respond when the situation demands it. You're not just a pair of hands. You are a small part of a system that needs to function even when the plan breaks. The man steps away from the desk, moving towards the door. "Keep doing what you're doing," he says. "We'll find more for you." He pauses, then adds almost as an afterthought, "and remember, people talk. The trick is knowing which ones matter." With that, he opens the door and leaves. The room feels different immediately. Lighter somehow, though nothing has changed physically. Mr. Rocco remains seated watching you. "You did fine," he says. "It's the closest thing to praise you have received from him. Thank you, Ripley." He gestures toward the door. "Go on," he says. "There's work tonight." "Of course there is." As you step back into the main room, the familiar sounds return. The click of billiard balls, the murmur of conversation, the low hum of the radio. But something has shifted. You have seen a little more of the structure behind the surface. The quiet decisions, the measured evaluations, the way control is discussed as calmly as weather. A curious detail comes to mind as you make your way toward the door. Some bosses in this era were known to keep meticulous mental records of everyone they dealt with, remembering names, faces, debts, and favors with remarkable precision. You wonder if the man upstairs has already stored you somewhere in that mental ledger. You suspect he has. Outside, the night has fully settled. The streetlights cast their soft glow on the pavement, and the city hums with its usual mix of life and secrecy. You pull your coat tighter and start walking. The work continues as it always does, but now you carry something new with you. Not just tasks, not just routes, an awareness. You are part of something that watches, measures, and decides. And somewhere above the noise and motion, there are people who see the whole board while you are still learning the shape of your own square. The first thing you notice is that the women are never as invisible as the men pretend they are. You have been slow to understand this, partly because the work teaches you to look past people, and partly because the loudest men in any room often behave as if volume is the same as importance. It is not. Tonight, as the city settles into its usual arrangement of secrets and lamps, you begin to see the quieter machinery turning behind the curtain. It starts in the flower shop above the speakeasy. Clara's in the back room, sorting coats, tickets, cigarette cases, and secrets with the calm precision of a bank clerk. The shop is closed, but the flowers remain in their buckets, pale and fragrant in the low light. Their perfume mixes with damp wool from the coats and the powdery scent of women's gloves. Somewhere below, the band is warming up, sending a sleepy little run of piano notes through the floorboards. "You're early," Clara says. "I was told to be." "That's how they get you," she says without looking up. First punctuality, then moral collapse. You almost laugh. Almost. With Clara, you are never sure whether laughter is safe, but it is often tempting. She hands you a small envelope and tells you to take it to Tess at the bar, then bring back whatever Tess gives you. No question, no delay. It sounds like one of the simple jobs which you now know means nothing at all. Downstairs, the club is not yet open to customers. Chairs are still turned on tables. The floor smells of soap-old smoke and spilled gin that has survived the mop out of pure stubbornness. Tess is behind the bar, counting cash-checking bottles and arguing softly with the supplier twice her size. He wants to charge more. Tess wants him to discover humility. She wins, not by shouting. She simply lists what he delivered last week, what was short, what was late, which crate had cracked glass, and which rival supplier would be delighted to replace him by breakfast. The man grumbles, but he lowers the price. When he leaves, Tess opens your envelope, reads the note, and gives you another, sealed with a smear of red wax. Back to Clara, she says, "And don't bend it." You take the envelope carefully. This is the night when you begin to understand that women are not just sitting at tables laughing under beads waiting to become part of someone else's story. They are keeping books, storing messages, managing rooms, spotting danger, hiring musicians, softening customers, hardening decisions, and remembering every unpaid debt with a serenity that feels almost religious. A solid piece of the historical picture is that women played many roles in Prohibition-era crime and nightlife, from club workers and hostesses to smugglers, bookkeepers, madams, drivers, and occasional operators of their own rackets. Some were exploited, some were entrepreneurial, and many were both at once depending on the day, the man, and the balance of cash in the drawer. You climb the stairs again. Clara takes the sealed envelope, studies the wax, and slips it into a hat box filled not with hats, but with smaller envelopes arranged in neat bundles. Everybody thinks the office is upstairs at the pool room, she says. Sometimes it's a hat box. You look at the hat box. It looks harmless. You are beginning to mistrust harmless objects. Later, Mr. Rocco sends you across town with a woman named May. She is perhaps 30, perhaps 40, depending on the light and how tired she is. She wears a dark coat, sensible shoes, and a hat with one small feather that seems far too cheerful for the hour. You are told to carry her bag and do exactly what she says. The bag is heavy. What's in it, you ask, before you can stop yourself. May gives you a sidelong look. Disappointment, she says. You do not ask again. The two of you walk through a neighbourhood of narrow stoops and warm kitchen windows. May knows everyone, or rather everyone knows May. A grocer lifts his chin as she passes. A policeman looks away in a manner so practised it might as well be choreography. A young woman with a baby at her hip opens a door before May knocks. Inside the apartment smells of milk, starch and coal heat. May sits at the kitchen table and speaks softly with the young woman while you stand near the door holding the bag full of disappointment. Money changes hands, then a smaller packet, then advice given in a tone that makes it sound like both kindness and instruction. Outside again, May explains nothing. At the next building, she collects cash from a card game run out of a back room. At another, she leaves a bottle with an elderly man who pays in coins wrapped in cloth. At a dressmaker's, she retrieves a ledger hidden behind folded patterns. Everywhere she goes, doors open. A curious little detail from the period comes alive in front of you. Some women used ordinary domestic objects to move illegal goods or messages, hiding flasks in handbags, notes in sewing baskets, and cash in hat linings or powder boxes. You've heard men joke that women's bags can hold anything. Tonight you suspect that includes half the neighbourhood's economy. May does not flirt, flatter, or threaten. She does something more effective. She knows who is sick, who is late on rent, who has a brother in jail, who is drinking too much, who can be trusted with a key, and who needs to be watched. Her knowledge is not decorative. It is infrastructure. The debate among historians remains lively over whether Prohibition expanded women's freedom in nightlife or simply moved older forms of control into more glamorous rooms. Walking beside May, you feel the truth resisting easy handling. The same world that lets Tess command a bar and Clara manage secrets also puts women at risk, makes them useful to powerful men, and punishes them harder when protection fails. Opportunity arrives, yes, but it arrives wearing a coat lined with hooks. Near midnight you return to the speakeasy. The room is full now, glowing and loud, with the band sliding into a tune that makes shoulders loosen and feet remember rhythm. Tess is serving 3 customers at once. Clara is moving between the coat room and the stairs. May disappears through a side door without saying goodbye. You stand near the passage and watch. A woman in green silk laughs at a table of brokers, but her eyes keep checking the mirror behind the bar. A singer with a low smoky voice adjusts the microphone and nods to the piano player. A waitress glides through the crowd, balancing drinks with miraculous calm, touching one man's wrist just long enough to remind him to pay, then moving away before he mistakes it for affection. There is danger here, but not helplessness. There is glamour here, but not ease. The work is constant, emotional, physical, financial, social. Women soothe drunk customers before they become expensive problems. They remember passwords. They redirect attention during raids. They hide ledgers beneath linens. They hear what men say when men believe themselves impressive. And truly, men do say a great deal when impressed by themselves. It is almost a public service to listen. Later, Tess lets you carry ice from the back room. The block is wrapped in burlap, burning cold against your palms. As you set it down behind the bar, she opens a drawer and shows you a small revolver resting beneath cocktail napkins. Not for showing, she says, for knowing. Then she closes the drawer. You do not touch it, you barely breathe. That single glimpse changes how you see her. Not because she has a weapon, but because she has prepared for a world that might require one. Her calm is not softness, it is discipline. Near closing, Clara finds you upstairs among the flowers. She is counting tickets by the weak light of a desk lamp. Her face looks tired now the brightness of the evening folded away. "You think you're learning the business?" she asks. "A little." She smiles, but not unkindly. "You're learning the men's version," she says. "That's the loud one." Below, someone laughs, and the sound rises through the floorboards, blurred and warm. You look at the flowers in their buckets, the hat box on the shelf, the curtain hiding the stairs. You think of May's baggie, Tess's drawer, Clara's ledgers, the waitress's careful hands, the singer's steady voice, and the green silk woman watching the mirror. The curtain, you realise, does not hide emptiness. It hides labour. When you finally step back outside, the night air feels cool against your face. A taxi rattles by. Somewhere a woman's heels click briskly along the pavement, confident and fading. You head home with the scent of lilies still clinging to your coat and with the uncomfortable knowledge that the underworld is not only built by the men who claim it, it is held together quietly and often brilliantly by the people they underestimate. By now you have learned that the law has footsteps. Sometimes those footsteps are heavy and official boots striking pavement in a rhythm that makes every backroom stiffen. Sometimes they are soft and familiar. A patrolman pausing outside the flower shop, tapping ash from his cigarette, pretending not to hear the trumpet warming up beneath the floor. And sometimes the law does not walk at all. It waits at a table, accepts coffee and leaves with an envelope tucked inside a newspaper. Tonight you are sent to deliver one of those envelopes. Mr. Rocco gives it to you in the pool room, sliding it across the green felt of an unused table. It is thick, but not too thick. Respectable thickness if bribery can have manners. Your instructions are simple. Walk to a restaurant 4 blocks south. Ask for the back room. Give the envelope to a man named Daly. Do not linger. Do not act nervous. That last instruction feels unfair. Acting nervous is one of your few natural talents. The evening air is damp and cool. Rain has recently passed, leaving the streets glossy under the lamps. Wagon wheels and motor tyres hiss through shallow puddles. Somewhere a dog barks once, then appears to reconsider its career in public commentary. You keep the envelope inside your coat pressed flat against your ribs. The restaurant is small, with lace curtains in the front window and a painted sign promising stew oysters and pie. It smells of onions, coffee and boiled beef. Ordinary smells, lawful smells. The waitress behind the counter does not ask why you are there. She simply nods toward a narrow hallway. The back room holds 3 men at a round table. One of them is Daly. You know this because he looks most like a man who expects envelopes. He has a square face, thinning hair, and the relaxed posture of someone who believes the room will arrange itself around him. His jacket is good but not flashy. His hands are clean. A police badge is not visible, which somehow makes him seem more official, not less. You step forward and place the envelope beside his coffee cup. "From Mr. Rocco," you say. Daly does not touch it immediately. He looks at you first. "You knew enough." One of the other men chuckles softly. Daly lifts the envelope, weighs it in his hand, and slips it into his inner pocket. "Tell him Thursday is better than Wednesday this week," he says. You nod, though you have no idea what that means. That is not your problem. Your job is to carry the message back exactly as given, like a human telegraph with worse shoes. A plain historical reality of prohibition is that corruption among police, local officials and politicians helped illegal alcohol businesses survive. Enforcement was uneven, often underfunded, and sometimes actively undermined by bribery or political protection. The law was real, certainly. People were arrested, raids happened, bars were smashed, bottles poured out and names printed in newspapers. But the law also had rent to pay, campaigns to fund, favours to return, and friends it preferred not to inconvenience. As you leave the restaurant, you realise your hands are cold. Not from the weather, from the ease of it. The envelope disappeared so smoothly. No drama, no whispered threats, just coffee stew smells and a man named Daly turning money into temporary property. Back at the pool room, Mr. Rocco listens to your message with no visible reaction. Thursday, he repeats. Then he nods to himself. Fine. You are beginning to see bribery less as an event and more as a maintenance routine, like sweeping the floor or checking the locks. Money goes out, pressure lowers. A route stays open, a raid happens somewhere else. Everyone pretends this is chance. The next night you are placed near the service entrance of the speakeasy during a busy hour. The club is full, warm and bright. Jazz spills from the bandstand, quick and playful. Glasses flash beneath amber lights. Perfume floats above tobacco smoke, and underneath it all sits the sour bite of spilled liquor. Tess is behind the bar, moving fast, her face calm and her eyes everywhere. Clara is upstairs, handling coats and secrets. The doorman checks passwords. You watch the side passage, feeling almost useful. Then the music changes. Not stops, changes. The drummer gives 2 soft taps, then 1. The piano slides into a slower tune. Conversations continue, but the room tightens. Tess reaches beneath the counter and closes a hidden panel. A waiter lifts a tray of glasses and turns toward the kitchen. The doorman opens the front door before anyone knocks. 2 policemen enter, not daily. Different men, uniformed, broad-shouldered, damp from the mist outside. One carries himself with theatrical annoyance, as if illegal drinking has deeply interrupted his evening. The other looks bored, which may be worse. The first officer scans the room. Well, he says, busy night. Mr. Rocco is not present, at least not visibly. Instead, the club manager, a narrow man named Vincent, appears from nowhere with a smile polished thin. Officers, Vincent says, always good to see the city protected. That is an impressive sentence, considering everyone in the room knows protection is exactly the question. The officers walk slowly through the club. Customers lower their eyes or lift their glasses with absurd innocence. One woman places her drink behind a vase as if the vase has become legally responsible. A man at the corner table begins eating olives with intense civic dedication. A small odd detail from the era comes to life around you. Some speakeasies used warning systems such as buzzers, lights, coded music cues, or signals from upstairs businesses to alert staff before a raid or inspection. Here apparently the drummer is part musician, part alarm bell. You make a note never to underestimate percussion. The first officer pauses near the bar. What are we serving tonight, he asks. Tess gives him a glassy smile, coffee, soda and poor decisions. The officer stares at her. Then he laughs. A few people breathe again. Not fully, just enough. Vincent guides the officers toward the rear hallway, where a small table has already been set with 2 cups, a plate of bread and an envelope folded beneath a napkin. You glimpse it only because you are standing nearby. The motion is so smooth it nearly vanishes. A waiter sets the plate down. The officer places his hand over the napkin. The envelope is gone. No bottles are broken, no arrests are made. The officers leave after 12 minutes carrying nothing visible except the pleasant satisfaction of men who've completed a private errand in public clothing. The room exhales. The drummer picks up the tempo again. Laughter returns, first cautiously, then too loudly. Someone orders another round because fear often makes people thirsty. Tess looks at you and raises one eyebrow as if to say then now you have seen the weather change indoors. Writers of this period and later scholars have often wrestled with whether corruption was the main reason prohibition failed or whether the law itself was impossible to enforce because public demand remained so strong. From your little post near the service passage, the answer feels tangled. Bribes matter. Demand matters. Politics matters. Human appetite, that old undefeated champion, matters very much indeed. You also see that not every officer is bought in the same way. Some take cash, some want information, some want favours for relatives, some want certain competitors troubled while others are ignored. Some like to imagine they are controlling crime by choosing which criminals may operate. That little fantasy must be comfortable, a pillow for the conscience. A week later you carry another message, this time to a precinct house. The building smells of wet wool ink, pipe smoke and old wooden benches rubbed smooth by anxious people. Men sit waiting, hats in hand. A woman argues at the front desk. Somewhere in a back room a typewriter clacks steadily, turning misery into paperwork. You deliver your note to a clerk who does not read it in front of you. He places it under a ledger and gives you a sealed reply. Outside, the daylight feels too honest. You begin to understand that the boundary between the mob and the official city is not a wall. It is a curtain. People pass through it. Money passes through it. Information passes through it. Sometimes the same man who shakes down a gambling room on Monday protects a liquor route on Friday. Sometimes a politician denounces crime in a speech, then attends a private dinner where the wine arrives through Mr. Rocco's friends. The hypocrisy would be funny if it were not so efficient. Late that night, back at the speakeasy, you stand near the stairs and listen to the muffled city above you. You think of Daly's coffee cup, the drummer's warning taps, Tess's calm smile, Vincent's folded napkin, and the patrolman walking away into mist. The law is not absent. That would be simpler. The law is present, selective, tired, hungry, proud, frightened, and occasionally for sale. It watches with one eye open and one eye politely closed, depending on who has paid for the privilege. And as the band slides into a soft final number, you realise that every bottle in the room carries not just the taste of grain or juniper or smoke, but the flavour of permission. Temporary permission. Purchased permission. Permission that can be withdrawn any night by any man with a badge, an ambition, or an empty pocket. By the time autumn settles over the city, you've learned that every neighbourhood has its own weather. Not just rain, wind, and the grey breath of the morning fog, but the weather people carry inside them. Suspicion in one block, pride in another, grief that has never quite left the stoops, hope hanging from clotheslines beside the laundry. You can feel the change when you cross certain streets, the way voices shift, the way shop signs change language, the way smells rise from basement kitchens and open windows. Tonight, Mr. Rocco sends you through several of these worlds before midnight. You begin in the Italian streets near the market where vendors are closing their stalls under strings of weak electric bulbs. Crushed tomatoes stain wooden crates. Garlic skins cling to the curb like little scraps of paper. Men argue with theatrical passion over prices they have already agreed to, while old women inspect produce as if each onion has a criminal record. From an upstairs window, someone sings a fragment of an old song in a tired, beautiful voice. Here Mr. Rocco's name travels easily, too easily. A nod at the bakery, a lowered voice at the barber shop, boy who runs ahead of you without being asked. You feel the strength of connection, but also its burden. Everyone seems to know everyone's cousin, godfather, landlord, debt and disappointment. Privacy has a hard time surviving in streets like these. You carry a message to a social club with lace curtains and a cracked marble step. Inside, men sit beneath framed photographs, drinking tiny cups of coffee so strong it tastes like a dare. They speak in a mix of English and Italian, moving between languages as naturally as breathing. When you hand over the message, a man with silver hair studies you for a moment and asks whose people you are. The question lands strangely. Not who are you, whose people are you? In this world, identity is not a single name. It is a chain behind you made of family village, church street work, and favours remembered long after money is gone. A firm historical truth is that many 1920s urban gangs grew within immigrant and working-class neighbourhoods where ethnic ties, language, poverty, discrimination and mutual aid shaped both opportunity and loyalty. Italian, Irish, Jewish, Polish, Black and other communities all built networks of survival in cities that often treated newcomers and minorities with suspicion or contempt. Some networks were lawful, generous and essential, some shaded into crime. Often the same street contained both. From the Italian market you travel west toward an Irish neighbourhood near the rail yards. The air changes. Beer smells drift from taverns that are definitely not serving beer. Thank you very much. Church bells mark the hour. Men in caps gather beneath a street lamp. Voices low, laughter sudden. A policeman stands at the corner chatting with a shopkeeper, and you cannot tell whether this is friendship surveillance business or all three wearing the same coat. You deliver a payment to a back room above a hardware store. The staircase smells of dust metal and boiled cabbage from somewhere below. Inside, a man named O'Malley counts the money without hurry. He is broad, red-faced and almost cheerful, which makes you trust him less. Cheerful men in this business often have excellent reasons. Rocco still running his trucks through division, he asks. You say you do not know. O'Malley smiles. Good answer. He gives you a receipt that is not a receipt folded into a newspaper. It seems the city is held together by envelopes, newspapers, and the shared belief that paper can pretend to be innocent. Your next stop takes you through a Jewish district where shop windows display bolts of fabric hats, prayer books, watches, and pastries dusted with sugar. The night air is rich with yeast onions, pickles, coal smoke, and the sharp tang of vinegar from barrels near the grocer's door. Men in dark coats speak quickly beneath awnings. Women carry parcels with brisk efficiency. A tailor's sign glows in Yiddish and English, each alphabet sharing the glass. Here you meet a bookmaker named Lev, who works from a cramped office behind a dry goods shop. He has delicate hands, tired eyes, and ink stains on 2 fingers. His desk is immaculate. The rest of the room is chaos. Ledgers string newspapers, ticket stubs, tea glasses, a cracked photograph of a family you politely do not examine. Lev checks the numbers you bring and shakes his head. Everyone wants luck, he says. No one wants arithmetic. You think this may be the motto of the entire decade. A small offbeat detail surfaces while you wait. In some neighborhoods, mutual aid societies, ethnic clubs, and funeral associations operated alongside informal gambling and protection networks, and outsiders often confused or deliberately smeared all of it as criminal. A burial fund, a social club, and a betting room might exist on the same block, sometimes even sharing members, but they were not the same thing. The city apparently enjoys making moral categories difficult just when sleepy narrators would prefer neat labels. That difficulty follows you into the next street. You pass a black neighborhood where jazz rises from basement clubs and apartments not polished for downtown visitors but alive, local, and deeply rooted. The sidewalks are busy despite the hour. Men in sharp suits lean near barbershops. Women in bright hats move in pairs, laughing softly. A child sleeps against his mother's shoulder on a stoop while a cornet practices somewhere behind a curtain, each note warm and aching. You are not sent far inside this community tonight. Mr. Rocco's reach is not equal everywhere, and you sense that other powers, other loyalties, and other rules shape these blocks. Still you deliver a sealed packet to a man outside a club where the doorman watches you with polite dislike. You do not blame him. You are carrying someone else's business into his doorway. The man takes the packet and gives you nothing back except a sentence. Tell Rocco we remember last winter. You repeat it in your mind all the way back. We remember last winter. It could mean a favour. It could mean an insult. It could mean both, which is often the most durable kind of message. Researchers continue to disagree about how much ethnic loyalty protected people inside these criminal networks and how much it trapped them, especially when poverty and prejudice narrowed legal choices. Your own experience suggests both again that irritatingly human answer. Family ties help you get work food warnings and protection. They also make it harder to walk away. When everyone knows your mother, your landlord, and your childhood nickname disappearance becomes very poor manners. By midnight your feet ache and your head is full of accents, smells, street names, and unfinished meanings. You return to the pool room with receipts that are not receipts, answers that are not explanations, and a message about last winter that makes Mr. Rocco go still for half a second. Only half a second. Then he nods. Good, he says. You want to ask what it means, you do not. Instead, you sit near the wall and listen to the room around you. Men speak English, Italian, and fragments of other languages picked up from docks, kitchens, cards, and marriage. Someone curses in one language and apologizes in another. Someone laughs at a joke you do not understand, which is perhaps for the best. You begin to see the mob's world not as one single underworld, but as a set of overlapping neighborhoods, each with its own history and wounds. People do not enter this life from nowhere. They come from crowded apartments, farms left behind ships crossed in fear, jobs denied signs that say help wanted, but not for you. Policemen who hear an accent and reach for suspicion, bosses who pay less because they can. None of that excuses the harm, it explains the doorway. And doorways matter. When you finally step outside, the streets feel layered beneath your shoes. Italian market stones, Irish rail yards, Jewish shop fronts, black clubs glowing with music, every block carrying memory, every favour tied to a name, every name tied to someone's idea of home. You walk back through the cool night, and for once the city does not feel like a machine. It feels like a crowded family table after an argument, everybody hungry, everybody proud, everybody remembering who passed the bread and who did not. You start to notice that people stop talking when certain doors close. Not loudly, not in a way that would draw attention. It is more like a soft dimming, as if the room has lowered its voice out of habit. Conversations drift, sentences shorten, laughter becomes careful. You feel it in the air before you understand why. Tonight you are stationed near the back hallway of the speakeasy again, where the music reaches you slightly delayed, softened by walls and distance. The band is lively, the crowd thicker than usual, and the scent of perfume sits heavily on top of smoke and liquor. But something underneath all that feels different, tighter. You have begun to understand that violence in this world is not always loud or dramatic. It does not always announce itself with shouting or broken glass. Often it is quiet, controlled, managed like everything else. A widely accepted truth about organised crime during this period is that violence was used strategically, not constantly, to enforce discipline, protect territory and maintain reputation. Too much noise brought attention. Too little consequence invited problems. The balance was deliberate. You see that balance tonight. It begins with a man you recognise only slightly. He's been here before, sitting at the bar, drinking more than most, talking more than necessary. Tonight he arrives already unsteady, his tie loose, his voice louder than the room permits. Tess serves him without comment. That is her way. But he keeps talking. About money. About odds. About how someone somewhere has been taking more than their share. He does not name names. He does not need to. His tone does the work for him. You feel the shift ripple outward. A man at the corner table stops dealing cards. The doorman glances toward the bar, then away. Vincent, the narrow manager, appears near the doorway, his expression unchanged, but his presence suddenly very deliberate. The music continues. That is important. The music always continues. You are told quietly to move a crate from one side of the room to the other. The crate does not need moving. You understand that now. You pick it up anyway, carrying it past the bar, past the man who is speaking too loudly. His words blur together as you pass, but you catch enough to know he's crossing a line that exists whether he believes in it or not. There are rules here, some written in ledgers, some written in memory, some written nowhere at all except in what happens when they are broken. You set the crate down near the service door and turn back. 2 men are now standing near the bar, not confronting, not yet, just present. The man keeps talking, then he stops, not because he has run out of words, because something has changed. You do not see the exact moment. That is part of it. It happens between one blink and the next in the space where attention slips. The man is guided away, not dragged, not struck. Simply guided, one hand on his arm, another at his back, as if he has suddenly remembered an appointment elsewhere. The door to the back hallway opens, closes. The music continues. The room breathes again slowly. People resume their conversations, though not exactly where they left off. There is a slight adjustment, like a chair being nudged back into place after someone stood too quickly. You remain where you are, holding nothing, doing nothing, and understanding more than you would prefer. A small, often overlooked detail from accounts of the era is how much effort went into keeping violence out of public view, especially in places meant to generate steady income. Disorder frightened customers. Fear disrupted business. So when something needed to happen, it happened elsewhere. Behind doors, around corners, in spaces designed for quiet resolution. You do not follow. That is not your role. Instead, you return to your position near the passage, your ears picking up the rhythm of the band, your eyes adjusting to the familiar glow of the room. Tess catches your glance for a moment. Her expression is neutral. Then she turns back to her work. It is not indifference. It is discipline. Later, when the crowd has thinned and the night leans toward closing, you're sent to take out a bag of refuse. It is heavier than usual, not in a way that alarms you, but enough to make you notice. Outside the alley is damp and quiet. The city has settled into its late-hour stillness where even the distant sounds feel softened. You set the bag down near the bins. For a moment, you stand there breathing in the cool air, letting the quiet settle around you. Then the back door opens behind you. One of the men from earlier steps out. He does not look at you. He does not speak. He simply walks past, disappearing into the darkness at the end of the alley. You do not ask. You do not follow. You go back inside. There is an understanding growing in you, slow and uncomfortable. Violence here is not chaos. It is structure. It has purpose, timing, restraint. And because of that, it is harder to predict. Some observers have long debated whether this controlled use of force made organised crime more stable or more dangerous in the long run. From where you stand, it feels like both at once. Stability built on fear is still fear. Order maintained through threat is still threat. The difference is in how it is presented. The room upstairs when you return looks almost untouched by what has just occurred. Glasses are being cleared. Chairs are being righted. The band has shifted to a slower tune, something gentle, almost reflective. If you did not know better, you might think nothing had happened at all. But you do know better. That is the problem. Knowledge does not always arrive with clarity. Sometimes it arrives as a weight, a sense that certain lines exist and that crossing them leads somewhere you're not meant to see. As you help Tess close the bar, wiping down surfaces that have held laughter arguments and quiet deals, you find yourself listening more carefully. Not just to what people say, but to what they stop saying. The pauses, the hesitation, the way a sentence changes direction halfway through. These are the signals. These are the things that matter. By the time you step out into the early morning, the sky just beginning to pale, you feel that weight settle a little deeper. You are still carrying crates, still running errands, still doing what you are told, but now you understand that beneath all of it there is a layer you cannot ignore. A layer that shapes behaviour, guides decisions, and enforces the rules no one writes down. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The city feels quieter as you walk home, not because it is, but because you're listening differently. By winter, you begin to understand that money has costumes. It can arrive smelling of spilled gin smoke and backroom cards, warm from a gambler's palm or damp from a driver's coat pocket. It can be folded into envelopes, tucked under ledgers, hidden inside cigar boxes, slipped through coat rooms, counted behind locked doors, but it rarely stays that way for long. Dirty money, like a nervous guest, wants to change its appearance before anyone asks where it came from. Tonight your work begins at a laundry, not metaphorically, an actual laundry. The front room is bright and steamy with shirts hanging from lines and collars stacked in crisp white rows. The air is thick with soap starch, hot metal and damp cotton. Women work over tubs and pressing boards, sleeves rolled, faces shining with heat. The whole place hisses and sighs like a sleeping dragon with excellent housekeeping standards. You carry a package to the owner, a narrow man named Mr. Bellini whose spectacles fog whenever he steps too close to the steam. He takes the package from you, places it beneath the counter and hands you a receipt for 3 dozen cleaned shirts. You have brought no shirts. He knows this. You know this. The receipt still looks lovely. A key fact from the era is that criminal money often moved through legitimate businesses, such as laundries, restaurants, garages, taxi firms, clubs and small shops. These fronts could explain cash income, employ trusted people, store goods and create a respectable surface for operations that were anything but respectable underneath. You look around the laundry and see it differently now. The big kettles, the neat invoices, the delivery boys, the customers waiting with bundles under their arms. All of it is real. The shirts are real, the soap is real, the tired women pressing collars are very real. That is what makes the disguise so effective. A front business is not always fake. Often it is both honest and crooked, at the same time, which is rude of history, but there we are. Mr. Bellini gives you a second envelope thinner than the first. For the guy, so you go. Outside, some snow has turned grey along the curb. Horses leave dark, wet tracks. Automobile tyres grind through slush. The city smells of coal smoke and cold iron. You tuck the envelope inside your coat and walk carefully, because falling on ice while carrying suspicious money feels like the sort of comedy that ends badly. The garage sits 2 blocks from the river. Inside, mechanics work under hanging lamps, their hands black with grease. Engines cough, tools clatter. A radio plays faintly beneath the noise. The floor is slick and the air tastes of gasoline rubber and metal filings. Sal is there arguing with a mechanic about a truck's suspension. She rides like a church pew into landslide, he says. The mechanic shrugs, then pray softer. You give the envelope to the garage owner, who signs another receipt, this one for replacement parts. Perhaps there are replacement parts, perhaps there are not. Perhaps the real replacement part is the money itself changing from one kind of record into another. That is the trick you are beginning to see. Money enters as cash from a speakeasy, a numbers route, a card room, a shipment. Then it passes through a business that can claim income. Drinks become laundry, bets become invoices, bribes become repairs, a night of illegal whiskey becomes a neat line in a book. One odd little detail from the wider world of prohibition finance is that the phrase money laundering is often popularly linked to laundries, especially because cash-heavy businesses were useful for disguise, though the exact origin of the phrase is more complicated than the legend suggests. Still standing in that steam-filled laundry, you can understand why the image sticks. Money goes in stained and comes out pressed. At the garage you are told to wait. Waiting is the most underestimated labour in the underworld. It looks like idleness, but it is not. It is controlled patience. You lean near a stack of tyres and listen to men talk around you. A shipment delayed by snow, a new restaurant needing cash registers, a cousin who can handle books, a politician's campaign dinner. Everyone speaks casually as if discussing weather, but the details fit together in your mind like gears. The respectable world and the hidden world are not separate roads. They are lanes on the same street. A restaurant can feed families at noon, host illegal drinkers at midnight, and report enough legitimate income by morning to satisfy a sleepy inspector. A garage can repair taxicabs and modify trucks for night routes. A florist can sell lilies upstairs while jazz and gin breathe below. Even the pool room is both a pool room and something else, its green tables offering the comfort of an obvious purpose. Economic historians and crime scholars have disagreed over how sophisticated these financial arrangements were in the 1920s, with some emphasizing rough improvisation and others pointing to increasingly complex systems of ownership, accounting, and political protection. From your position near the tyres, it feels like sophistication grows wherever survival requires it. Nobody needs a grand theory when the rent is due, and the police captain expects his envelope on Thursday. Later, Mr. Rocco sends you to a restaurant called the Blue Fig. It is nicer than places you usually enter through the front. White tablecloths, polished mirrors, a woman in a dark dress playing a violin near the wall. The smell of roasted meat, butter, wine sauce, and lemon rises warmly from the kitchen. The host greets Mr. Rocco's name with just enough respect to be noticed, not enough to alarm the customers. You are shown to a small office behind the pantry where the owner, Mrs. Alvarez, keeps her books. She is a compact woman with silver combs in her hair and a stare sharp enough to slice bread. Her desk is covered with ledgers, receipts, menus, and a single vase containing one tired carnation. She does not waste words. Sit, she says. You sit. She opens a ledger and shows you columns of numbers. Food purchases, wages, repairs, private dining fees, delivery charges, entertainment expenses. Some are real, some are padded. Some are apparently works of fiction with excellent penmanship. You can hide a great deal in a busy dining room, she says. People see what they expect. Plates, waiters, bills. They do not see the river moving underneath. The river? You like that? Money as water finding channels, slipping through cracks, carrying silt from one place to another. Mrs. Alvarez gives you a stack of menus to deliver back to the pool room. Inside one menu, folded behind the dessert list, is a note. You feel it as you walk, a slight stiffness in the paper. Apple tart chocolate cake, coded instruction. Something for everyone. By now the work feels less like entering a criminal empire, and more like walking through the backside of ordinary commerce. The mob does not float above the city. It rents property, pays drivers, buys ice, repairs engines, tips waiters, bribes insectors. It needs accountants as much as tough men, maybe more. A man with a ledger can move more quietly than a man with a fist. You think back to the first parcel of bottles, the first coin in your hand, the first time you believed this life was made mostly of secret rooms. Now you see the secret rooms are attached to kitchens, laundries, garages, and flower shops. The underworld does not hide beneath the city like a cave. It threads through the city like wiring inside a wall. At closing time, you pass the laundry again. Through the front window, you see shirts hanging in pale rows, ghostly in the steam. A woman lifts a hot iron and presses a collar flat. The motion is firm, practiced, almost tender. For a moment, you wonder how much she knows. Perhaps everything. Perhaps only enough. That is how the whole business survives on degrees of knowing. Full knowledge for a few, useful knowledge for many, comfortable ignorance for anyone who can afford it. You walk home through snow beginning to fall again light and soft over the rooftops covering ash barrels, stoops, carriage wheels and footprints. The city looks cleaner beneath it, though you know better now. Clean is not always clean. Sometimes it is only what shows after the stains have been carefully folded away. By the time the city begins calling itself modern, you have learned to distrust sparkle. Sparkle is everywhere now. It flashes on beaded dresses, polished shoes, wet streets, glassware, cufflinks, taxi lamps, and the brass bell of the club's cornet. It catches in mirrors and cigarette cases. It dances on the surface of cocktails poured from bottles that have travelled through barns, bribes, garages, and hands that would rather not be remembered. The jazz age looks bright from the outside. From the inside, it smells like smoke, sweat, perfume, cold money, and floorboards scrubbed after 3 a.m. Tonight, the Blue Fig has been transformed for a private party. Mrs. Alvarez has rented the back dining room to men who prefer not to be named on paper. White cloths cover the tables. Candles burn in little glass cups. The violinist has been replaced by a jazz trio, and the drummer is playing with brushes so soft the rhythm seems to arrive on stocking feet. You are there to carry bottles from a pantry to a service station, but also to watch. There is always watching. It is the unpaid tail on every job. The guests arrive laughing before they enter the room. Women in silk and satin, shoulders bare beneath fur wraps. Men in tuxedos, hair slicked down, voices rich with money or the performance of it. The room warms quickly. Cigarette smoke curls toward the ceiling. Champagne opens with small bright pops that make people smile as if the sound itself is wealth. One well-known reality of the 1920s is that the decade's image of prosperity and pleasure was unevenly distributed. While some urban Americans enjoyed consumer goods nightlife and new forms of entertainment, many workers, immigrants, farmers, and poor families remained under pressure. The shining jazz age was real, but it was never the whole country and certainly not the whole city. You understand that by now. You have seen the shine and the back stairs. At the party, a young man with a college ring orders gin as if he invented thirst. A woman with a silver headband dances alone for a moment near the piano, eyes closed, beads trembling down her dress like raindrops. A broker tells a joke about prohibition, and everyone laughs too loudly because illegal pleasure is funnier when nobody expects consequences. You carry a tray through the room and feel invisible in the way service workers are often invisible. Not unseen exactly, but uncounted. People glance at your hands, not your face. They notice whether their glass is full, not whether your shoulder aches. This invisibility has uses. You hear things. A man near the window complains about a stock tip. Another boasts about a new radio set. A woman murmurs that her husband thinks she is at her sister's house. Someone asks where the whiskey came from, and the host replies, "My dear, from civilization." That is a good line. Also a lie. It came from a truck with bad suspension. The room grows louder. The music quickens. Shoes slide across the floor. Silk whispers against wool, and laughter rises in bright little bursts. For a while you almost understand the appeal. The world upstairs is cold, uncertain, and full of rules. Down here, under the candles, time loosens. People drink what they are not supposed to drink, say what they are not supposed to say, touch hands beneath tables, and pretend dawn has been postponed. But pretending has a cost. In the hallway you find a waiter leaning against the wall. Eyes closed, one hand pressed to his stomach. His name is Eddie. He has worked 3 nights in a row and a double shift before that. He straightens when he sees you. "Still alive," he says. "Congratulations." Don't congratulate too loud, it may hear you. He takes another tray and goes back in. That is the other side of the illusion. The party floats because others hold it up, cooks sweating over stoves, drivers waiting in alleys, musicians playing until their wrists ache, waitresses smiling through pinched shoes, bookkeepers smoothing impossible numbers into believable columns, people like you carrying bottle after bottle while wealthy guests announce that the age is carefree. Carefree. You are learning often means someone else is carrying the care. A strange little social detail of the decade is that some party hosts loved novelty so much they served cocktails with theatrical names, staged treasure hunts, hired jazz bands for apartment parties, or arranged rooms to feel like pirate dens, Roman banquets, or fake tropical gardens. The modern world apparently wished to escape itself by decorating the cage. Tonight's theme is Venetian midnight, though no one involved has been to Venice, and the nearest canal is a filthy drainage channel behind the market. There are paper masks on the table, black and gold tied with ribbon. Guests hold them to their faces and become briefly more honest by pretending to be someone else. You see Mr. Rocco arrive late. He does not wear a mask. He does not need one. He speaks with the host, shakes two hands, accepts no drink, and surveys the room with his usual quiet expression. The party bends around him almost imperceptibly. Not fear exactly, not in these people. Many of them are too insulated to recognize fear unless it arrives with a bill. But they sense importance. They sense the man behind the bottle. A continuing question among cultural historians is whether the glamour of the 1920s was a rebellious break from Victorian restraint, or a carefully marketed fantasy built on consumption inequality and selective memory. In this room, both ideas sit together in the candlelight. The women dancing really are freer than their mothers in some ways. The music really is New Boulder live. The pleasure is real. So are the debts, the exhaustion, the racism at club doors, the police payoffs, and the quiet despair of people smiling because their livelihood depends on it. Near 1 in the morning, the singer from the speakeasy arrives to perform. Her name is Lottie, and her voice is low enough to make conversation fall away without being asked. She sings a slow number about waiting for someone who never comes home. The room softens. Even the most foolish men grow still, perhaps because music can reach the places lectures cannot. You stand near the pantry door holding an empty tray and listen. For a few minutes, the whole arrangement feels fragile. The candles, the masks, the illegal drinks, the careful clothes, the borrowed glamour. Everyone in the room is trying to be lifted out of ordinary life, but ordinary life waits patiently outside with the coats. When the song ends, applause blooms gently. Then the spell breaks. Someone laughs. Someone calls for more champagne. Eddie hurries past you with a tray of glasses, pale and bubbling. Mrs. Alvarez appears in the doorway counting heads bottles and probable damages. By 3, the party has begun to wilt. The candles gutter low. Lipstick stains the rims of glasses. A paper mask lies crushed beneath a chair. One guest sleeps with his cheek on the tablecloth while his friends debate whether he is charming or embarrassing. The answer appears to be expensive. You help clear plates from tables slick with melted ice and spilled wine. The room that looked enchanted at midnight now looks human. Crumbs, ash, wilted flowers, damp napkins, unpaid tips. Glamour, it turns out, leaves quite a mess. Outside, the first streetcars grind along their tracks. The sky is still dark, but morning has begun preparing its paperwork. You carry a crate to the alley and pause in the cold air. Your shirt clings to your back, your feet ache. The party's music still trembles faintly in your ears, but it is fading now, replaced by the ordinary city waking. You think of the woman dancing alone, the broker boasting Eddie leaning against the wall, Lottie singing about absence, Mr. Rocco standing maskless among masks. The jazz age is not false. That would be too easy. It is real in the way a reflection is real. Bright, distorted, dependent on light, and gone the moment the surface breaks. You return inside to carry the last bottles away, already knowing that by tonight another room will glow, another band will play, and someone will mistake sparkle for freedom all over again. The jobs that worry you most are never the large ones. It is not the long drives, the crowded parties, or even the quiet meetings upstairs that make your stomach tighten. It is the small errands, the ones that arrive without explanation wrapped in simplicity, the ones that sound harmless enough to accept without thinking, and important enough that refusing is not an option. Tonight's task is exactly that. Mr. Rocco hands you a key. Not a speech, not a warning, just a small brass key warm from his palm. Second building on Mercer, he says. Third floor, room at the end, take what's there, bring it back. You nod because that is what you do now. Outside the air is sharp with cold. Your breath shows faintly as you walk. Mercer Street is quieter than most, lined with narrow buildings that lean slightly toward one another, as if sharing gossip across the gap. Windows glow here and there. A radio hums behind one wall. Somewhere someone is cooking onions late, and the smell drifts through the stairwell as you enter the building. The hallway is dim, the kind of dim that suggests either neglect or intention. These stairs creak under your weight each step, announcing you in a language you cannot silence. By the time you reach the third floor, you feel as though the building knows you are there. The door at the end of the hall is closed. You stand there for a moment, the key in your hand, listening. Nothing. No voices, no movement. Just the faint hum of the city filtering through the walls. You unlock the door. Inside the room is bare except for a table, a chair, and a single suitcase placed neatly in the centre. The air smells faintly of dust and something metallic like coins or old tools. The window is covered with a thin curtain that lets in a weak grey light from the street lamp outside. You step in carefully, closing the door behind you. The suitcase looks ordinary. That makes it suspicious. You approach it slowly as if it might object to being opened. The latch clicks with a soft, final sound that echoes more than it should in the empty room. Inside there is money. Not stacks in the dramatic sense, not piles spilling over, just bundles, neatly arranged, wrapped in paper, quiet. You stare at it for a moment longer than necessary. Money has weight. Not just physical, though you feel that too when you lift the suitcase. It has a presence, a gravity. It pulls your thoughts in certain directions, makes certain choices feel closer than they should. A straightforward historical observation is that large amounts of cash circulated in illegal enterprises during Prohibition, often requiring trusted individuals to transport, store and account for it without the safety of formal banking systems. Trust in this context was not a polite concept. It was enforced, tested, and remembered. You close the suitcase. This is one of those moments. A simple job, take the case, bring it back. Nothing complicated, which is exactly why it matters. As you step back into the hallway, the building seems to listen again. Every sound feels amplified. The creak of the floor, the soft thud of your steps, the distant murmur of a radio on another floor. You carry the suitcase down the stairs, your grip firm, your pace steady. Do not rush. Do not linger. These are the rules you repeat to yourself. Outside, the street is empty except for a man smoking beneath a lamp. He glances at you briefly, then looks away. You cannot tell whether he noticed the suitcase or simply noticed you. You keep walking. Halfway down the block, you hear footsteps behind you. Not close, not fast, just present. You do not turn around. Turning would mean acknowledging. Acknowledging could mean inviting. Instead, you adjust your pace slightly, neither speeding up nor slowing down, letting the rhythm remain natural. The footsteps continue. Then after a moment that stretches longer than it should, they fade. You do not know if the person turned down another street, stopped, or simply chose not to follow further. You do not look back to find out. A small curious detail from stories of the time is that couriers often relied on ordinary appearance as their greatest protection. No flashy cars, no obvious guards, just a person walking down the street with something that did not announce itself. The less remarkable you seemed, the safer you were. You reach the pool room without incident. Inside, the familiar sounds greet you. The click of balls, the murmur of conversation, the low hum of the radio. It feels almost surreal after the quiet tension of the walk. You place the suitcase on the table in front of Mr. Rocco. He opens it, glances inside and closes it again. No counting. Not here. Not in front of you. He nods once. Good, he says. That is all. But you feel the weight of it. Not just the approval, but the expectation that comes with it. The understanding that you have been trusted with something small and important and that you have returned it unchanged. There will be more like this. There are always more. Later, as you sit near the wall watching the room move through its usual patterns, you find your thoughts drifting back to the suitcase, to the moment when it sat open in front of you, to the quiet bundles inside, to the choices that briefly appeared and then disappeared just as quickly. Some analysts of organised crime have suggested that these small tests of reliability were as important as any formal initiation shaping who could be trusted with greater responsibility. Others believe that opportunity itself was the test that anyone placed in such a position revealed their character simply by what they did when no one was watching. You're not sure which is true, perhaps both, perhaps neither. What you do know is that the job did not feel small. It felt like standing at the edge of something, looking down and deciding not to step forward. As the night continues, you return to your usual tasks, carrying bottles, watching doors, listening without appearing to listen. But something has shifted again, not in the world around you, in how you see it. The small jobs are not small, they are precise, each one a thread pulled tight, connecting you to something larger, something that measures and remembers. When you finally step out into the early morning, the sky pale and quiet, you feel that connection more clearly than ever. You're part of the system now, not at the centre, not even close, but no longer at the edges either. And as you walk home, the memory of the suitcase stays with you, not as a burden, but as a reminder. In this world, the simplest tasks often carry the greatest weight. You begin to feel the edges of the city. Not the physical edges, though you have seen those on the long drives out past the last street lamps and into fields that swallow sound. These edges are different. Invisible lines that run down certain streets, across certain corners, through certain doorways. Lines that no one draws, but everyone seems to know. Tonight you are told to cross one. Mr. Rocco does not explain it in those terms. He simply gives you an address and a time, a delivery, a meeting, routine on the surface, but there is a pause before he hands you the note just long enough for you to notice. Be polite, he says. That is all. Polite. You have learned that words like that carry weight here. The address takes you into a part of the city you have not worked in before. The buildings are similar enough, brick and stone narrow windows, iron fire escapes clinging to the sides like stubborn vines. But the feeling is different. The rhythm of the street, the way people look at you or do not look at you. You are not unknown here. You are uninvited. You keep your pace steady, your expression neutral, your hands visible. The note stays tucked inside your coat, flat against your chest. A corner store catches your eye. The sign above the door is painted in a style you do not recognize, the lettering sharp and deliberate. Inside you glimpse shelves of goods arranged with careful precision. A man behind the counter watches you pass, his gaze lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. You continue. The building you are looking for stands halfway down the block, 3 stories, dark windows, a single light burning above the entrance. You stop at the door. Knock once. Wait. The door opens just enough for a face to appear. You do not recognize the man, but that does not matter. Recognition flows in one direction here, and it is rarely yours. Yes, he says. You give the name, not your name. Mr. Rocco's. The door opens wide. Inside the hallway smells faintly of polish and something sharper like tobacco mixed with spices you cannot place. The man gestures for you to follow. Up the stairs. 2nd floor. A room at the front. You enter. There are 4 men inside. They do not rise. They do not greet you. They simply look. You feel the weight of it immediately. Not hostility exactly, something more measured. Assessment, calculation. You step forward and place the note on the table. For you, you say. One of the men reaches for it, unfolds it, reads, silence. Then a small exchange of glances between them. The man folds the note again more carefully this time. He sends you another, asks, yes, only you, yes. They study you for a moment longer. You realize slowly that you are not just delivering a message. You are part of it, an indication, a signal, a test perhaps of how far trust extends. A well-documented aspect of organised crime in this period that rival groups often operated within clearly understood territories, even if those boundaries were never formally mapped. Crossing into another group's area for business required negotiation permission, or at the very least careful handling to avoid conflict. You are standing in that careful handling. The man who read the note speaks again. Tell him we heard. He says, "That's not much. It is also everything." You nod. There is nothing else to say. You turn to leave, aware of their eyes following you to the door, down the hallway, down the stairs. Outside, the air feels colder. You walk back the way you came, the invisible line now behind you, though it does not feel entirely left behind. These boundaries do not disappear when you cross them. They linger like a memory in the street itself. Halfway down the block, you notice a group of men standing near a parked car. They are not doing anything in particular, just standing, talking quietly, watching. You do not look at them directly. You do not need to. You feel their attention like a shift in the air. You keep walking. A curious detail from accounts of territorial disputes is that sometimes the simplest gestures carried the most meaning. A car parked in the wrong place, a delivery made without notice, a face seen too often on a street where it did not belong. These small signals could escalate tensions long before anything openly confrontational occurred. You understand that now. The city is not just a collection of streets. It is a map of permission. Back at the pool room, you deliver the message exactly as it was given. "We heard." Mr. Rocco nods, his expression unreadable. "Good," he says. But you notice something. A slight shift. Not concern. Not relief. Something in between, as if the response has confirmed what he expected, but not necessarily what he hoped. Later that night, the atmosphere in the room feels different. Quieter. More watchful. Conversations pause more often. Glances linger a little longer. Even the sound of the billiard ball seems sharper, more precise. You find yourself listening more closely, not for words, but for tone. There is a tension in the air. Not immediate, not explosive, but present, like the pressure before a storm that may or may not arrive. Some historians have explored whether rivalries during this era were driven more by competition over profits or by personal conflicts between leaders. Others suggest that the lines between business and personal pride were often blurred, making disputes more volatile than they might otherwise have been. From where you stand, it feels less like a question of cause and more like a condition of the world you are in. Competition exists. So does pride. So does memory. And memory here is Ong. You think back to the man who said, "We remember last winter." You begin to understand that these words are not just recollections. They are markers, points on a timeline that stretches backward and forward, connecting events, decisions, and consequences in ways that are not always visible from where you stand. Near closing, Sal joined you by the wall. "Went out tonight?" he asks. You nod. "Different part of town." He grunts softly. "Yeah," he says. "You can feel it, can't you?" You do not need to ask what he means. The edges, the lines, the sense that every step is measured against something you cannot quite see. Just remember, Sal adds, not every street is yours, even if you're walking on it. He says it casually, as if offering advice about avoiding puddles, but you hear the weight behind it. When you finally step outside, the night has deepened. The city feels larger now, not because it has grown, because you have seen more of it. The parts that connect, the parts that divide, the spaces where one world ends and another begins, even if the buildings look the same. As you walk home, you find yourself paying attention to corners you once ignored, to faces you once passed without thought, to the subtle shifts in atmosphere that signal where you are and where you are not meant to be. The work continues. The errands, the deliveries, the quiet movements through a system that grows more complex the longer you remain inside it. But now you carry something else with you, an awareness of boundaries, not written, not spoken, but always there. And as you turn onto your own street, the one that still feels like yours, at least for now, you realize that crossing those invisible lines is never just about distance. It is about understanding where you stand and who is watching when you move. By now you know the city that has more than one way of telling a story. There is the story whispered in back rooms, where names are shortened, favors are counted, and every sentence seems to carry a second meaning. There is the story carried in ledgers with numbers arranged neatly enough to make sin look like bookkeeping. There is the story sung by jazz bands at 2 a.m, full of longing and brass and smoke. And then there is the story printed in newspapers. That one arrives folded on doorsteps, stacked outside stations, tucked under arms, and shouted by boys on corners whose voices crack from overuse. It smells of ink-damp paper and urgency. It turns last night's fear into this morning's headline with all the softness squeezed out. You notice the headline, but before anyone hands it to you. Mob kingpin seen at nightclub raid. The paper is hanging from a rack outside a cigar shop, black letters thick enough to bruise the page. Beneath the headline is a grainy photograph of a man in a hat stepping from a doorway with one hand raised to block the flash. It is not Mr. Rocco, not anyone from your immediate circle, but everyone in the pool room reads it as if it concerns them personally. Because it does. Public attention is weather. It gathers, darkens, and sometimes breaks over people who thought they were standing indoors. A reliable feature of the 1920s crime world is that newspapers helped turn certain gangsters into public figures. Men involved in bootlegging, gambling, and violence could become infamous through headlines, photographs, court reports, gossip columns, and dramatic nicknames. The press did not create organised crime, of course, but it shaped how ordinary readers imagined it. At the pool room, the paper passes from hand to hand. Someone laughs at the nickname the reporter has chosen. Someone else says the photograph makes the man look taller than he is. Tess, visiting from the speakeasy to discuss a supply problem, reads the article and snorts. Kingpin, she says, last month he owed 3 people for cigars. This is the first thing you learn about newspaper fame. It is often larger than the person wearing it. The second thing you learn is that fame can be useful. Customers like a story. They like the thrill of drinking in a place connected to dangerous names, provided the danger remains arranged at a flattering distance. A club with a famous patron becomes more exciting. A bottle from a notorious route tastes stronger. A man at a table becomes interesting if some columnist once called him a mastermind. Even if his greatest talent is remembering which alderman has a brother with debts, the newspapers sell fear and glamour together wrapped in ink. That evening you are sent to deliver menus to the Blue Fig, and you pass 3 newsboys shouting about the same case, each version louder than the last. The words bounce off brick walls. Raid. Boss. Vice. $1 million racket. You almost laugh at that last one. The numbers in print always seem rounder than the money in envelopes. Real money is wrinkled, counted twice short by $5 stained with coffee, and somehow always needed somewhere else. At the Blue Fig, Mrs. Alvarez has the paper spread beside her ledger. She reads without moving her lips, which feels like a small act of power. They make them sound like emperors, she says. Are they not? She looks up at you. Emperors do not hide receipts in soup menus. Fair point. A peculiar detail from the newspaper culture of the era is that criminals often received catchy nicknames from reporters, police rivals, or the street itself. Some names exaggerated elegance, cruelty, size, or habits. A man could become Scarface Bug's Legs or Big Something, even if the truth behind the name was messy invented or deeply unflattering. The public loved a label. Labels make danger easier to purchase with a penny at breakfast. You wonder what nickname they would give you. Probably nothing glorious. New Shoes has already been taken by Tess, and frankly it lacks menace. The next day the headline changes again. A different paper claims a different man was behind the raid. Another hints that corrupt officials were involved, but names none of them. A gossip column describes a glamorous woman seen leaving a club before police arrived, making her sound like a duchess of wickedness, rather than someone who probably just wanted her coat. You begin to understand how stories loosen from facts. In the pool room, the men joke about reporters, but they read every line. Mr. Rocco reads quietly, folding the paper with care afterward. He does not dismiss it. He studies it. Public myth may be nonsense, but nonsense can still cause raids. Panic customers, frighten partners, embolden rivals, and attract federal eyes. The disposable workers people like you will rarely appear in print. That is another lesson. The papers like bosses, gunmen, showgirls, raids, judges, widows, and dramatic photographs. They do not care much about the driver who stayed awake all night. The laundress who hid an envelope, the bartender who changed the subject at the right second, or the courier who crossed a border between neighbourhoods with a note under his coat. You are the unseen labour beneath the legend. Maybe that is safer. Maybe that is sadder. Writers and historians have long questioned whether press coverage of gangsters exposed corruption or accidentally promoted criminal celebrity. Standing at the edge of this world, you can see both sides. The newspapers reveal scandals, name crimes, and embarrass officials. They also turn certain men into characters so vivid that bored readers start confusing notoriety with greatness. It is difficult to warn people about a fire while selling postcards of the flames. One evening you see the machinery up close. A reporter comes to the speakeasy, not openly. He arrives as a customer, but everyone knows. He wears a brown suit, carries a small notebook, and asks questions that pretend to be compliments. He wants atmosphere. He wants colour. He wants to know whether the club really serves imported whiskey, and whether any famous men have passed through. Tess gives him nothing useful. "People come in," she says. "What kind of people?" "Thirsty ones." He smiles but writes that down. You're nearby with a tray and hear him ask Vincent whether rumours of police protection are true. Vincent replies with a long, elegant sentence about civic respect, responsible hospitality, and the tragedy of unfounded speculation. It means absolutely nothing. It is in its way a masterpiece. Later, Clara tells you the reporter will print something anyway. They always do, she says. A blank page frightens them. She is right. 2 days later, an article appears describing hidden nightlife in language so rich you barely recognise the place. The ceiling becomes velvet, though it is stained plaster. The clientele becomes dazzling, though one man fell asleep in his soup last week. The band becomes world famous, which will amuse the drummer who currently owes rent. No names are printed, but anyone who knows the neighbourhood can guess enough. Mr. Rocco is displeased, not angry in the loud sense. Displeased in the quiet sense, which is worse. The club reduces activity for several nights. Deliveries shift, passwords change. A man who talked too much is not seen around for a while. The public story has altered the private routine. That is the power of ink. It does not need to be accurate to be dangerous. As the weeks pass, you notice customers bringing newspapers into the club, comparing stories, laughing at scandals, asking whether this or that rumour is true. They want to feel close to the myth. They want the room to be illegal but not frightening, dangerous but not to them, authentic but with clean glasses and good music. Modern people will understand this better than they might like. Everyone wants the behind-the-scenes tour until they smell the alley. You stand by the passage watching them read about a world they are sitting inside without really seeing. They know the names from headlines. They do not know Sal's bad suspension, Mrs. Alvarez's ledgers, May's heavy baying, Clara's hat box, Tess's drawer beneath the cocktail napkins, or the old man who bets the same number every week. They know the legend. You know the errands. Near dawn, after the last customers leave, you pick up a discarded newspaper from a table. The ink smudges your thumb. There is another photograph, another bold headline, another man made enormous by typeface. You fold the paper slowly. For a moment you feel almost relieved that no one knows your name. Then you realise the machine does not need your name printed to own part of your life. Outside the morning presses pale light against the windows. Newsboys will soon shout the city awake, selling yesterday's sins as today's entertainment. And somewhere behind the fresh ink, behind the grand nicknames and public myths, people like you will keep moving through alleys, kitchens, garages, and backstairs, carrying the quieter truth that never quite fits in a headline. You start to feel the pressure before you understand its source. It arrives not as a single event, but as a series of small changes. A delivery delayed without explanation, a familiar face missing from the pool room, a conversation that stops just a little too quickly when you enter. The rhythm of the work shifts subtle but unmistakable, like a clock that has begun to tick louder. Something is closing in. At first, you think it might be another neighbourhood tension, another invisible boundary being tested. But this feels broader than that, less personal, more systematic. You hear the word federal more often. Not shouted and not even emphasised, just placed carefully into sentences like a piece on a board that changes the entire game. Tonight you are sent to the Blue Fig earlier than usual. The restaurant is not yet open to customers. Chairs are still stacked. The kitchen is awake, though already alive with the sounds of chopping, boiling and low conversation. The air smells of garlic stock and fresh bread. Mrs. Alvarez is at her desk, but her ledgers are closed. That is unusual. She looks up as you enter. "You're early," she says. "I was told to be." She nods as if confirming something to herself. "Good. she replies. You sit. She does not speak immediately. Instead, she listens, not to you, to the room, to the building, to something beyond it. You ever hear of the bureau? She asks finally. You hesitate. Which one? She gives you a look that suggests there is only one that matters tonight. The federal boys, she says. Treasury, prohibition agents, men who don't belong to this city. That last part lands differently. Do not belong. It suggests a kind of distance, a lack of familiarity, a different set of rules. A well-documented development of the later 1920s is that federal enforcement of prohibition began to intensify with agents from national agencies becoming more involved in investigating and prosecuting organized crime. Unlike local police, these agents were often less entangled in neighborhood relationships, though not entirely immune to corruption themselves. You think of Daly and his coffee, of envelopes beneath napkins, of patrolmen who look away at the right moment. Federal agents, you suspect, do not drink the same coffee. They don't care who your cousin is, Mrs. Alvarez continues. They don't care which ward you vote in. They care about numbers, records, patterns. She taps her closed ledger. That's where they look. You feel a small tightening in your chest. Numbers, again. Always numbers. Is that a problem, you ask? She studies you for a moment. It depends, she says, on how careful people have been. Careful? You think of the laundry receipts, the garage invoices, the menus with notes folded inside. Careful, yes, but careful is not the same as invisible. Later that evening, the pool room feels different. Quieter. Not empty, but restrained. Mr. Rocco is there speaking with two men you do not recognize. Their suits are darker, their expressions more fixed. They do not look like customers, they do not look like local businessmen. They look like men who are used to asking questions. You're told to stay in the main room, so you stay, but you listen. Fragments of conversation drift out from the office upstairs. Words like audit shipment records, timing. You cannot piece together the full picture, but the tone is enough. This is not about a single delivery. This is about the structure itself. A small but telling detail from this period is that some federal investigations focus not just on catching illegal activity in the moment, but on building cases through financial records, tax violations, and long-term patterns of behavior. It was a different kind of pressure, less visible, but potentially more damaging. You begin to understand why. A raid can be paid off. A patrolman can be persuaded. But a pattern once seen is harder to erase. As the night progresses, you notice other changes. Deliveries are rerouted. Names are avoided more carefully. Even the music at the speakeasy seems slightly subdued, though that may be your imagination. Or perhaps not. You're sent out with a message to the garage. Sal is there working under the hood of a truck, his hands moving with practiced ease. Things feel tight, you say, keeping your voice low. He glances up at you. Yeah, he replies. Feels like someone's counting. Counting. The word settles heavily. Does that matter, you ask? He wipes his hands on a rag. Everything matters when someone's counting, he says. On your way back, you pass a building you recognize. The one on Mercer. The one with the suitcase. The window is dark now. No light. No movement. Just a closed door and a quiet street. You wonder if the money's gone, or if it has moved somewhere else, or if someone has already come looking for it. Some historians have suggested that the increasing pressure from federal authorities in the late 1920s contributed to shifts in how organized crime operated, pushing some groups toward greater secrecy and others toward more aggressive expansion. From your position, it feels less like strategy and more like reaction. Adapt or be exposed. Those are the options. Back at the speakeasy, the atmosphere is more controlled than usual. Tess moves with her usual precision, but you notice her checking the door more often. Clara keeps the coachroom organized with even greater care. Vincent speaks in shorter sentences. Everyone is adjusts for the song. No one says why. Near midnight, a man arrives who does not fit the room. He is well dressed, but not in the same way as the usual customers. His suit is neat, his tie plain, his shoes polished but practical. He orders coffee. Actual coffee. Tess serves it without comment. He sits alone watching, not drinking much, not speaking, just observing. You feel it immediately. The difference. He is not here for the music. He is not here for the drinks. He is here for something else. You do not know if he is a federal agent, but you know he is not part of the usual pattern. That is enough. A quiet, almost trivial detail from stories of enforcement is that agents sometimes entered establishments without making arrests, simply to observe, to gather information, to understand how the place operated. Presence alone could be a form of pressure. The man finishes his coffee, leaves payment, stands. For a brief moment his eyes pass over the room, not lingering but not missing much either. Then he leaves. The door closes. The room exhales, but not fully. Something has changed. You feel it in the way people move, the way voices stay just a little lower, the way glances linger a fraction longer on unfamiliar faces. This is not the loud danger of a cold raid. This is something quieter, more patient, more persistent. As the night winds down, you find yourself thinking about the structure you have become part of. The routes, the deliveries, the ledgers, the connections between places that once seemed separate. All of it now feels like something that can be seen from above, mapped, analysed, understood. And if it can be understood, it can be targeted. When you step outside into the early morning, the city looks the same. Street lamps fading, shops closed, the faint hum of life beginning again. But you know better now. The pressure is not always visible. Sometimes it is a shift in attention, a new set of eyes, a different kind of counting. And as you walk home, you realise that for the first time since you started this work, the danger does not feel like something you can avoid by following the rules. It feels like something that is slowly learning the rules itself. The first lesson of loyalty is that nobody calls it fear. They call it respect, they call it discretion, they call it knowing how things are done. They call it being sensible, which is one of the most dangerous compliments a person can receive in your line of work. But underneath the softer words, something heavier waits. A pressure behind the ribs, a habit of stopping your own sentence before it grows teeth. You feel it most clearly in the pool room on a rainy Tuesday when a man named Frankie stops coming in. At first, no one says anything. That is how absence announces itself here, quietly. A chair remains empty, a joke has no owner, a glass is not set out. The room continues around the missing space, but not comfortably. Frankie was not important, not in any grand way. He carried messages, watched doors collected from 2 card rooms, and once helped Sal change a tire in sleep while complaining so creatively that even Sal laughed. He had a narrow face, restless hands, and a habit of tapping ash before the cigarette needed it. Now he's simply not there. You notice, everyone notices. No one asks. This, you understand, is the work silence does. A plain truth of organised crime in the 1920s is that loyalty was not only emotional, it was practical in force through dependence, shared secrets, debt, family ties, money, and the threat of consequences. People stayed quiet because they were loyal. Yes, but also because speaking could endanger their income, their relatives, their neighbourhood standing, or their future. The rain ticks against the pool room windows. Billiard balls click. Someone laughs too late at a joke. Mr. Rocco sits at his usual table reading a newspaper with the calm of a man who has trained his face not to confess weather. You wait for him to mention Frankie. He does not. Instead, he gives you a new assignment. Take this to Clara, he says, handing over a sealed envelope. No detours. No detours. Every instruction has begun to sound like a test. Outside, rain darkens the sidewalks and makes the street lamps blur. You keep the envelope inside your coat, one hand pressed lightly over it. The city smells of wet wool, coal smoke, and horse manure softened into the gutter. A taxi splashes past and cold water freckles your trouser leg. You reach the flower shop without incident. Inside, the lilies are beginning to brown at the edges. Their sweetness has thickened into something faintly rotten beneath the perfume. Clara's behind the counter sorting ribbons. She takes the envelope and does not open it. Frankie, you ask before you can stop yourself. Her hands pause, only for a moment. And then they continue. Careful, she says softly. That is all, not an answer. Better than an answer. You look at the flowers, at the damp umbrellas in the stand, at the curtain leading to the stairs below. The band has not started yet. The whole place feels suspended. Clara finally looks up. You are learning the hardest part, she says. What part is that? Knowing something and doing nothing with it. You want to tell her that sounds cowardly. You do not. Because perhaps it is. Perhaps it is also survival. The two have been sharing rooms for a very long time. A peculiar detail from underworld life is that silence could become ritualized in small behaviors. People avoided certain names, changed subjects at familiar cues, burned notes, used nicknames, or pretended not to recognize someone they had known for years. Forgetting when performed by enough people at once becomes a kind of public ceremony. By evening, Frankie's name has vanished, not from memory, from conversation. At the speakeasy, customers laugh, the drummer brushes the snare, Tess serves drinks, and Clara moves between coats with her usual composure. But beneath the music, you can feel the empty space where questions should be. You stand near the passage and watch people trust one another in small temporary ways. A customer trusts the bartender not to poison the drink. The bartender trusts the doorman to keep trouble out. The doorman trusts the drummer to signal trouble before it enters. The driver trusts the garage. The bookkeeper trusts the numbers. Mr. Rocco trusts you perhaps a little with envelopes and routes. But trust here is not warm. It is conditional. It's a bridge built over dark water and every plank is inspected daily. Later that night, Sal finds you in the alley behind the club. He is smoking beneath the awning, watching rain fall in silver lines through the light. You asked about Frank. Is this? Oh, good. Oh, Frankie. Here? Mad for me as will be, says. You go still. Clara told you. He gives you a look. Everybody tells everybody by not telling. That is annoyingly true. You lean against the damp brick beside him. What happened? Sal exhales slowly. Don't know. You glance at him. He shrugs. And if I did, I'd still tell you I don't know. The rain fills the silence between you. Then he adds quieter. He talked too much. Maybe to the wrong person. Maybe just near the wrong person. Maybe nothing happened at all and he left town to marry a baker's daughter. Do you believe that? No, Sal says, but it's a nicer story. You both stand there listening to the water drip from the awning. A continuing dispute among crime historians concerns how much loyalty inside these groups came from genuine bonds of friendship and community, and how much came from coercion. Your life gives you no clean answer. Sal might help you because he likes you. Mr. Rocco might protect you because you are useful. Clara might warn you because she's kind. Any one of them might also step away if you became dangerous to know. Human affection exists here. So does calculation. They are not opposites. That's the unpleasant part. Over the next few days, paranoia settles into your routine like dust. You check reflections in windows. You notice when footsteps match yours too long. You replay conversations wondering whether you said too much, too little, or exactly enough in the wrong tone. Even sleep becomes suspicious, full of half-done dreams where numbers turn into names and doors open onto rooms you do not recognize. You're not alone in this. The whole operation seems tighter. Tess writes less down. Clara changes the arrangement of the coatroom envelopes. Mrs. Alvarez keeps one ledger visible and another somewhere you are not permitted to know. Sal refuses to use the same road twice in a week. Mr. Rocco smiles less, though to be fair, he was never exactly a carnival. One night you are asked to identify a man from a distance. Nothing more. You stand in a doorway across the street from a cigar shop while Vincent asks, "Is that the fellow from Mercer?" You look. A man exits the shop, collar raised against the cold. You saw him once, maybe twice. In this life, maybe is not a comfortable word. I think so, you say. Vincent does not like that. You think. Your mouth goes dry. Yes, you say, it is him. Vincent watches you for a beat, then nods. The man across the street walks away unaware or pretending to be. You do not know what your answer will cause. That is another burden of this world. Small statements can travel farther than intended. A yes becomes a suspicion becomes a decision becomes an absence. You remember Frankie. You wish you did not. By late winter, silence has become less like a rule and more like an organ in your body. It works automatically. Someone mentions a route, you forget the street. Someone asks who was at the table, you remember only the weather. A customer makes a joke about Mr. Rocco, and you let your face remain still enough to be furniture. There is skill in this. There is also damage, because every swallowed question settles somewhere. Every unsaid name gathers weight. And yet there are moments of tenderness that complicate everything. Clara leaves a cup of coffee for you on a freezing night. Tess notices your hand shaking and gives you a task in the storage room where no one can see. Sal walks 2 blocks out of his way to make sure no one is following you home. These gestures are small, but they are real. That is why leaving is difficult even before you try. Loyalty is not only chains. Sometimes it is coffee, a warning, a hand on your shoulder, someone remembering how you take your sandwich after midnight. And sometimes that is how the chains learn to feel warm. Near dawn, you return to the pool room after a delivery. Mr. Rocco is alone at the table by the window. For once, no cards, no newspaper, no coffee, just his hands folded in front of him. "You're doing fine," he says. You nod. The words should comfort you. Instead, they make you aware of how closely you are being watched. Outside, the rain has stopped. The street shines beneath the lamps, every puddle holding a broken copy of the city. You step out carefully, your shoes touching reflections that tremble and vanish. You think of Frankie, whose name no one says. You think of Clara's warning. You think of Sal's nicestry. And as morning begins to gather behind the rooftops, you understand that silence is not empty at all. It is crowded. Crowded with favours, fears, debts, memories, and all the words that must be carried without ever being spoken. The first sign that prohibition is cracking is not a speech. It is not a headline and not a raid, not a grand announcement from some marble building where serious men pretend to discover what everyone else has known for years. It is smaller than that. It is a change in tone. People begin to sound tired of the game. Not everyone, of course. The thirsty remain thirsty. The profitable remain devoted to profit, a very loyal religion. But in restaurants, streetcars, barbershops, and apartment kitchens, you hear a new kind of complaint. Not just about illegal liquor, but about the law itself, about hypocrisy, about corruption, about the absurdity of chasing bottles while real troubles sit heavily on kitchen tables. By now the decade is leaning toward its end. You feel it in the city's mood. The early sparkle has dulled. The clubs still glow, the bands still play, and the money still moves, but the air has changed. The machine keeps turning, yet some of its gears sound worn. Tonight you carry a message to Mrs. Alvarez at the Blue Fig. The restaurant is quieter than usual, not empty, just subdued. Men read papers over soup. Women speak in lower voices. The violinist plays something soft near the wall, a tune that seems to fold itself into the candlelight. Mrs. Alvarez is in her office tapping a pencil against a ledger. That she says before you even sit is the sound of politics entering business. You listen to the pencil. Tap, tap, tap. It sounds harmless. You know better. A major historical point is that by the late 1920s and early 1930s, public support for prohibition had weakened significantly, driven by enforcement problems, corruption, changing social attitudes, and the need for tax revenue during economic crisis. Repeal would not arrive until 1933, but the pressure against the dry laws was already building before then. In your world, this does not feel like moral victory. There is uncertainty. If liquor becomes legal again, what happens to all the routes, bribes, drivers, sellers, coded menus, and men who have grown rich in the shadow of a law people no longer respect? A business built on illegality does not simply bow politely and retire when the law changes. It looks for another door. Mrs. Alvarez closes the ledger. They're talking about reform downtown, she says. Wet candidates, dry candidates, committees, speeches. Everybody suddenly has principles. Do they? She looks at you over her spectacles. No, but some have polls. That sounds about right. You leave the Blue Fig and walk toward the pool room through a misty evening. Newspaper stands display arguments in bold black letters. One paper praises enforcement. Another calls prohibition a failure. A third seems mostly excited that important people are shouting at one another. Newsprint loves a quarrel. It practically purrs. At the pool room, Mr. Rocco is meeting with men you recognize and others you do not. The air smells of coffee, tobacco, damp coats, and caution. The talk is not about tomorrow's delivery. It is about months ahead. Breweries, licenses, politicians, warehouses, unions, gambling, protection nightclubs that might someday serve legal drinks and still need illegal help with everything else. You're sent to wait near the door, but waiting has made you an expert in fragments. Legal beer cuts the price. Not if we control distribution. Clubs still need protection. Numbers keep running. Trucks can carry anything. That last sentence stays with you. Trucks can carry anything. Liquor has been the great engine, yes, but it is not the only cargo in the world. Once people learn how to move forbidden things, how to pay officials, how to intimidate rivals, how to launder money, how to turn fear into structure, they do not forget because one law weakens. A curious little detail from the period is that some former bootlegging networks later adapted to other rackets, while some illegal operators tried to move into legitimate beer liquor distribution restaurants, clubs, or labour racketeering after repeal. The skills were transferable, which is a chilling way to describe a decade of crime, but accurate enough to make you uncomfortable. At the speakeasy, the change feels even more personal. Customers talk about repeal as if it will be one long party, as if the mere legality of alcohol will polish every glass and forgive every debt. A woman in blue satin tells her companion that once the law changes, everything will be civilized again. Tess hears this and looks at you. Her expression says beautifully that civilization has never cleaned a bar at 4 a.m. The club remains busy, but the thrill has shifted. Some customers drink now with a kind of nostalgia for the present, already missing the danger before it has passed. They speak of speakeasies as if they are romantic relics, while still sitting inside one and asking for another gin. Humans are strange little historians of their own bad habits. A continuing argument among scholars is whether prohibition strengthened organised crime permanently or merely accelerated criminal structures that were already forming in urban America. From your place near the service passage, you suspect the law did both less and more than people say. It gave opportunity, it gave scale, it made certain men rich, but it did not invent greed, poverty, corruption, or the pleasure of getting away with something. Those were already waiting patient as cats. The federal pressure has not disappeared either. If anything, it sharpens as the politics grow louder. Agents still watch, records still matter. Tax questions follow money like hounds that have learned arithmetic. You hear of cases built not on bottles but on income. Men who could dodge a raid begin to fear ledgers. This seems almost funny until you remember how many ledgers have passed through your hands disguised as menus, invoices, and laundry receipts. One evening, Sal drives you along the river road, the truck lighter than usual. Rain taps on the windshield. The rosary swings in its familiar rhythm. You pass warehouses that once felt solidly useful and now seem uncertain, as if the buildings themselves are wondering what business they will be in next. Think it ends, you ask. Sal keeps his eyes on the road. What? All of this, if the law changes, he snorts softly. You ever see a cat stop eating because you moved the bowl? You think about that number. There you go. For a while, neither of you speaks. The road glistens under the headlights. The river lies black beside you, carrying reflected lamps in broken lines. Sal finally adds, maybe the bottle changes, maybe the label changes, men stay men. It is not a comforting philosophy. But Sal has never shown much interest in comfort, unless it comes wrapped around a sandwich. By spring, the city's conversations grow even more restless. Reform leagues speak in halls. Ministers argue from pulpits. Politicians calculate. Businessmen who once bought illegal whiskey now complain about the disorder caused by illegal whiskey, which is convenient if nothing else. People who drank in secret begin to speak publicly about common sense. Dry supporters warn of moral collapse. Wet supporters point to corruption and lost tax money. Everyone insists history is on their side, which is one of history's least favourite chores. Inside the mob's world, preparation continues. Some routes slow. Others shift. Certain storage rooms are emptied. Certain relationships are renewed with officials who may matter in a different future. Mr. Rocco spends more time upstairs. Tess updates supplier lists. Clara reorganizes her hatbox system. Mrs. Alvarez changes her ledgers again, and you decide that if civilization survives, it may be because women with sharp pencils keep rewriting its accounts. You feel the change in yourself too. At the beginning, you thought the world you entered was fixed, a hidden city beneath the ordinary one. Now you understand it is always adapting. Every law, every election, every raid, every newspaper scandal, every economic tremor sends a ripple through the rooms where you work. The machine is not dying, it is listening. That may be worse. Late one night after the club closes, you stand alone in the flower shop above the speakeasy. The lilies have been replaced with carnations. Their scent is lighter, peppery and clean. Below, the band has gone silent. Chairs rest upside down on tables. The bottles are locked away. Through the front window, you see a newsboy stacking tomorrow's papers before dawn. Fresh ink, fresh arguments, fresh certainty from people who will change their minds when it becomes profitable. You think of your first parcel, your first truck ride, your first night below the flowers. All of it was built around a law meant to stop drinking. Instead, the law taught a generation of criminals how to organize. And now, as the law begins to tremble, you realize the shadow it created will not simply vanish with the morning. It will change shape. You begin thinking about leaving long before you admit it to yourself. It does not arrive as a grand decision. No dramatic moment, no speech in the mirror, no suitcase packed in righteous silence. It comes quietly the way most important thoughts do in this life. A pause that lingers a little longer than it should. A question that refuses to be ignored. What if you stopped? The idea feels almost inappropriate at first, like asking to leave a conversation that has not finished speaking. You have work, you have a place, you have people who expect you to show up, carry watch, remember, and keep quiet. Leaving is not just about walking away from tasks. It is about stepping out of a network that has already learned your shape. Tonight the thought returns as you walk home from the pool room. The streets are damp from an earlier rain, reflecting the street lamps in broken patches of gold. A man sweeps his storefront with slow, tired strokes. Somewhere a radio plays softly behind a curtain, a song you almost recognize but cannot quite place. You pass the corner where the newsboys gather in the morning. The stand is empty now, but you can imagine the papers stacked there, waiting to turn tomorrow into something loud and certain. You keep walking. What if you stopped? A grounded observation about people working in organized crime during this period is that leaving was rarely simple. Economic need, personal connections, fear of retaliation, and the lack of legitimate opportunities often made departure difficult even for those who wanted out. The system did not rely on chains, it relied on entanglement. You feel that entanglement in small ways, the way Sal expects you at the truck, the way Tess hands you a glass to polish without asking, the way Clara sets aside envelopes with your route in mind, the way Mr. Rocco nods once as if that is all the approval you need to continue. You're woven into the routine. Pull one thread and something shifts. The next evening you mention it to Sal, not directly. You never say, "I want to leave." Instead you say, "You ever think about doing something else?" Sal is under the hood of a truck, his hands deep in machinery. He does not look up. "Like what?" "I don't know, something quiet. Dear." He snorts. "This is quiet," he says. You almost smile. "That's not what I mean." He wipes his hands and leans back, finally looking at you. "You mean something straight," he says. You nod. He studies you for a moment. "You got a straight job lined up. Number. You got savings." "Some." He nods slowly. That's not nothing he says, but it's not much either. You both know what he means. Starting over costs more than money. A small revealing detail from accounts of this world is that many low-level workers did drift in and out of illegal activities, sometimes holding legitimate jobs alongside them, sometimes stepping away for periods before being drawn back by necessity or familiarity. The boundary between staying and leaving was not always a clean line. "You could try," Sal says finally. "Find a job, keep your head down, pretend you were never here. Would it work?" He shrugs. "Depends who remembers you." That word again. Remembers. Memory is a currency here. Not always spoken, but always present. You think of the man who said, "We remember last winter." You think of Frankie, whose absence still sits quietly in the room. You think of the notebook with the initials and marks, the ledgers, the roots, the faces. It is not just about leaving. It is about being forgotten. And that is not something you can control. Later that night, you find Clara in the flower shop rearranging stems in a bucket. The carnations are fresher now, they're scent sharp and clean. You ever think about leaving, you ask? She does not look surprised. Every week, she says. And every week I stay. She adjusts a flower, trimming the stem with careful precision. Why you are cool? You ask. She pauses. Then she looks at you. Because I know how this works, she says. Out there, I would have to learn everything again. And here, at least, I understand the rules. You nod. There is comfort in familiarity, even when that familiarity is built on things you would rather not examine too closely. Some historians have explored whether people in these environments stayed primarily out of fear, or because the system offered stability that was otherwise hard to find. Your experience suggests the answer is not simple. Stability can feel like safety even when it is conditional. At the speakeasy, the night unfolds as usual. Music, laughter, glasses. But you see it differently now. Every interaction carries a weight you did not notice before. Every favour, every glance, every small exchange feels like part of a web that extends further than you can see. You are part of that web. Leaving would mean stepping out of it. And webs do not always let go easily. Near closing, Tess catches you staring at nothing. You look like you're thinking, she says. That bad. Terrible, she replies. Don't make a habit of it. You smile faintly. What if I did, you ask? Make a habit of thinking. She studies you for a moment. Then you'd start noticing things she says. And once you notice enough, you either get careful or you get gone. And you? I got careful, she says. Of course she did. She is still here. A curious little observation about human nature is that people often convince themselves they have more options than they truly do, or fewer. Both can be dangerous. In your case, the options exist, but they are shaped by forces you do not fully control. You walk home that night with the thoughts still sitting quietly in your mind. What if you stopped? You imagine it. A different job, a different routine, mornings instead of nights, work that does not require watching doors or carrying envelopes that should not exist. It is possible. Not easy, but possible. Then you imagine the other side, the people who would notice your absence. The questions that might be asked, the assumptions that might be made. In this world, leaving is not always interpreted as a personal decision. Sometimes it is seen as a statement, and statements can have consequences. As you reach your building, you pause at the door. The street behind you is quiet. The city breathes steady and indifferent. You stand there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of both choices. Stay, leave. Neither feels simple. Neither feels entirely safe. That is the truth you are left with, not a clear path, just a crossroads that does not announce itself waiting for you to decide when or if you will step off the road you have been walking. For now you turn the handle and go inside. The question remains. Morning comes slowly at the end of the decade, not all at once, not with trumpets or clean answers, but with a pale light pressing against windows that have seen too many nights. The city does not wake innocent. It wakes tired. It wakes with ash in the gutters, empty bottles hidden and beneath trash newspapers damp from mist, and people stepping carefully over the remains of whatever seemed glamorous after midnight. You are still here. That surprises you sometime. You've carried parcels, notes, numbers, money menus, keys, rumours and silence. You've watched the hidden city open beneath fabriques, behind kitchens, inside garages and across neighbourhood lines no map admits exist. You've learned the weight of a suitcase, the meaning of a pause, the cost of being useful. Now the roaring 20s are no longer roaring in quite the same way. They are coughing. The parties continue, but the laughter has changed. Money still moves, but more people count it twice. Men who once boasted loudly about investments now speak in lower voices. Clubs still glow at night, though sometimes the brightness feels forced, as if everyone is trying to prove the music can drown out the future. A key historical truth is that the stock market crash of October 1929 did not immediately end every pleasure of the decade, but it marked a devastating turning point. The Great Depression followed, reshaping American life and changing the economic ground beneath both legal and illegal businesses. You hear about the crash first in fragments. A customer at the Blue Fig snaps at a waiter. A broker drinks too much and laughs at nothing. Mrs. Alvarez closes her office door for longer than usual. At the pool room, men gather around newspapers reading columns of numbers as if the print might rearrange itself out of pity. It does not. The city outside feels colder, though. Perhaps that is only your imagination. Bread lines begin to lengthen. Jobs become harder to find. Men who once slipped into speakeasies with loose money now nurse one drink and stare into it as if searching for instructions. Women stretch household budgets thinner and thinner, turning leftovers into strategy. The mob does not vanish in hardship. Hardship gives it new customers. That is a grim thing to understand. Desperation can make people careful, but it can also make them available. Available for loans, errands, bets, protection, favours, risks. The same machine that fed on appetite now learns to feed on anxiety. A strange little detail from the period is that some illegal gambling operations remained attractive during hard times because they offered tiny, affordable dreams. A small bet could feel like a private rebellion against hopeless arithmetic. You remember the old man who chose the same number every week, and you wonder if he still plays it, still placing faith in digits while the wider world misplaces fortunes. By now your own question has not left you. What if you stopped? It sits with you in the mornings when you wash smoke from your hands. It follows you through streets where men look for work and women compare prices at market stalls. It waits beside you in the pool room where Mr. Rocco seems older now, though perhaps you are only seeing him more clearly. One evening he calls you upstairs again. The office is unchanged. Desk chairs, cabinet warped window. The same ordinary room where power once seemed almost tidy. Mr. Rocco sits behind the desk with a ledger closed in front of him. "You've been quiet," he says. You almost smile. "I thought that was preferred." He looks at you for a long moment. "It is," he says, "until it means something. There it is. The danger of being known." You say nothing. He studies you, and for once his face seems less like a mask and more like a tired man wearing one. "Things are changing," he says. "Some people handle change badly." You nod. "That true of you?" he asks. The room grows still. You think of every door, every route, every woman behind the curtain, every envelope, every sadness, every small kindness that felt like warmth, and every warning hidden inside it. "I don't know," you say. It is not the safest answer, but it is honest. Mr. Rocco leans back. For a moment you think he may be angry. Instead he sighs through his nose. "Most men don't," he says. "They just pretend sooner." That is all he says. No threat, no permission, no blessing. Just a sentence that leaves the door neither open nor closed. Some scholars have wrestled with whether the end of Prohibition weakened mob power, or simply redirected it into gambling, labour rackets, narcotics, unions, nightclubs, and legitimate businesses. From where you stand watching the decade fade into economic fear, the answer feels like smoke changing rooms. The shape alters. The smell remains. When repeal finally comes in 1933, it will be celebrated by many as common sense restored. But you're not there yet. You're standing in the uneasy space before that ending, when everyone senses the old arrangement weakening, but no one knows what will replace it. And you low in the structure feel the uncertainty most personally, because bosses adapt. But businesses rename themselves, politicians change speeches, but small workers must choose whether to keep walking the same streets. On your last night in this memory, you return to the flower shop. The speakeasy below is quieter than it once was. The band still plays, but softly. Tess polishes glasses with her usual sharp grace. Clara stands among coats and hat boxes, older in the eyes than when you first met her. Sal waits outside with the truck engine idling, rosary swinging gently in the windshield. Nothing dramatic happens. That feels right. Most endings do not know they are endings while they happen. You help carry the final crate of the night. It is lighter than expected. The wood is rough beneath your hands. The alley smells of rain, coal smoke, and wilted flowers thrown into a bin behind the shop. Sal watches you set the crate down. You still thinking, he asks. Sometimes. Dangerous habit. "So I've heard." He gives you half a smile. Then he climbs into the truck and drives away, the engine fading into the early morning. You stand there a while. The city around you is no longer the same city you entered at the beginning. Or perhaps it is, and you are the one who has changed. You know where the hidden doors are now. You know which respectable windows glow over illegal rooms. You know how pleasure is supplied, how fear is maintained, how money changes clothes, how silence becomes crowded. You also know that history rarely gives clean exits. It gives morning, grey, damp, imperfect morning. You step out of the alley and onto the street. A newsboy is stacking papers nearby. A woman opens a bakery door and warm bread scent spills into the cold air. A streetcar bell rings in the distance. The city continues because cities are rude that way. They do not pause just because your understanding has become heavy. You take one breath, then another, and for the first time in a long while you walk without carrying anything in your hands. And now as the street softens around you, let the story loosen its grip. You do not need to follow the truck any farther tonight. You do not need to count the envelopes, remember the passwords, or listen for footsteps behind you. The hidden doors can close gently now, the lamps can blur in the mist, the music can fade down through the floorboards until it is only a warm memory, slow and distant. The city remains there behind you with its brick walls, wet pavements, flower shops, back rooms, ledgers and tired dawns. But you are moving away from it step by quiet step. The danger is past. The work is done. The night has given back its secrets, and you can set them down like a heavy coat at the end of a long winter evening. Breathe in slowly. Let the air be clean, now cool and simple. Breathe out and let the smoke, the noise, the sharp edges of the decade drift away. Somewhere far behind you, a trumpet plays one last note, soft as lamplight on rain. A door closes, not with fear, but with rest. The bakery opens. The morning brightens. The streets become ordinary again, and ordinary can be a beautiful word when you're tired. You're safe outside the story now. The city grows smaller, quieter, gentler. Its alleys fold into shadow. Its windows dim. Its voices lower until they are no more than a murmur beneath sleep. Let the last image be simple pale morning over rooftops, warm bread in the air, and your empty hands resting easily at your sides. Nothing more is required of you tonight. The road is quiet. The lights are low, and you may finally drift. Sweet dreams.